One Piece Supreme Control, Chapter 61-80. Chapter 61 Grouping. In the end, Dillons and Drizzt stood together. Looking at Drizzt beside him, he said with some disgust, "I didn't expect it to go with you, a gambler." Drizzt was a little crazy at this time, looking at the sky and murmured, "Today, I feel that there are some dark clouds covering it. I should still stay on the boat." Dillons couldn't help looking at the sky. It was clear and cloudless, rolled his eyes, and blurted out 3 words, "Crazy." The 7 people were divided into 4 teams and began to move freely in Rogue Town. Rogue Town can be said to be the most prosperous island in the East China Sea. It is famous for One Piece, so passing ships have used it as a turning point to supply the last stop on the Great Waterway. Luo and Glades were in a team. Both of them were taciturn people. They were silent along the way, until they entered the town and saw the bustling crowd. Glades said sullenly, "Luo, I want to buy a set of kitchen utensils and some materials." Quote. Oh, Luo didn't seem to wake up, only one word. Glades rolled his eyes. Do you have any money?" "No," Rodo said a word. Glades covered his forehead. He suddenly realized that it was a mistake to team up with this dull person. But when things came to an end, there was no way out. "As pirates, do you sometimes rob things?" Glades said sideways. If he didn't have money, he wouldn't be able to buy the things he needed. "Yes, steal the pirates." Rodo said a few words, and then looked at Glades fixedly, and there was no doubt that the meaning in his eyes was, "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Well, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't do this." Glades put his arms around Luo's shoulders, and the two walked forward, but suddenly stopped after walking 10 meters away. Luo was surprised to find that Glades' whole body was shaking. "Dude, what's the matter?" Immediately afterwards, he saw Glades strode forward fiercely and came to the door of a restaurant. Without hesitation, he stretched out his right hand, aimed it at a tall man, and pressed it down suddenly. Bang! The big man fell directly on the table, and then Glades began to kick and punch frantically. Luo's eyes trembled, and he covered his forehead speechlessly. He wanted to pretend that he didn't know this person. So Luo Wuyan stood there and didn't move forward. "Labor and management make you waste food, and beat you to death." Glades cursed frantically as if he had released the little devil in his heart. Strangely, the person who was knocked to the ground by Glades did not resist at all, as if he had suddenly fallen into a coma or was imprisoned by a strange force. "Fuck, this kid is mentally ill, beat him up. Where is the madness? Kill him, even the people of our sub-malt pirates dare to beat him. Fuck him, you little bastard." There were more than a dozen people at the same table and the next table, all standing up, their faces full of fire. They haven't seen such a person before, and they hit people as soon as they come up. It's so unreasonable to play cards, it's crazy. Kill him, must kill him. Glades was immediately surrounded, and a very urgent battle began. Luo covered his forehead again. He couldn't stand it any longer. Glades is like a hooligan on the street. In addition to the mysterious devil fruit ability, his physical skills are simply terrible. Basically, when someone punches him 10 times, he punches someone else once. But in the end, Glades was victorious. Looking at Glades, who was trembling with a bruised nose and a swollen face in front of him, Luo's mouth twitched slightly, and he really couldn't smile. "Luo, take out all the Baileys on them, we have enough money." Glades sucked in pain, but still stood straight in front of Luo. Labor and capital hate waste the most. Food people, these scumbags. Luo's face twitched, and by taking action, he took out the Baileys from these pirates one by one, and put them into his pockets. He moved quickly, obviously not the first time. These are all Luo Bing, Mariah, Dillons taught him, very fast. Then, the two stepped up and prepared to leave here. At this moment, the pirate behind him suddenly shouted. "Who are you? Sign up, and I, the Malt Pirates, will not let you go." Luo paused and said gloomily, "Death Pirates, come on." Then, the two disappeared and left. The members of the Malt Pirates stood up, looked at the two with hatred on their faces, and said with hatred, "Death pirates, we will not let you go." And after the man finished speaking, he was surprised to find that the people beside him were all terrified. "You guys, what's wrong? Run, run." A crew member shouted and ran away from here quickly. And some looked sluggish and confused, their whole bodies were shaking, and they were talking to themselves in horror. The death god pirates, the ghost pirates wandering the four seas, the terrifying pirates with the same strength as the great pirates on the Great Waterway. How could they come to the East China Sea? We actually provoked them. More than a dozen people lost their souls, as if the sky was falling, and their whole bodies were trembling with fear. Not to mention these pirates, Dillons and Drizzt are completely aimless. Drizzt, who seemed to be hit, had a listless look on his face. He seemed to be soft and completely unable to lift his spirits. He would collapse on Dillons's body several times, and was disgusted by the latter. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Expel. Damn it, if you do this again, the labor and management will beat you up. Dillons said loudly. Dark clouds cover the top, the sun can't even see it. I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Drizzt was lost, as if his soul had been swallowed up. Dillons was helpless and dragged Drizzt forward. He still had this mission. The captain instructed him to collect the sea tower stones on the island after passing through one place. Although this item is a contraband, most of which are monopolized by the Navy, there are still a few outflows. However, these things are generally underground exchanges and belong to the dark area. How did we come here? Drizzt asked blankly. Of course there is something to do. Dillons said coldly. In a while, you can use your gambling skills to win 30 million Baileys. I will be of great use. Hey, I'm covered by dark clouds today, my luck is very bad. Drizzt said anxiously. Dillons rolled his eyes and hoped no more. He knows that this kid's luck is indeed like this. When he says it's good, it's all good. If it's bad, it's useless at all. Chapter 62 Asuna. The two entered the underground exchange and looked at the lively dark area. Dillons asked for 2 cat face masks from the door with a cold face, and handed Drizzt one. Don't talk too much here, don't reveal your identity, you know. Dillons looked very serious. Drizzt nodded blankly. Such a deputy captain is rare, but he is very imposing. Then the two started to act together. Dillons was very skilled in everything in the underground place. He went through the normal process, and then came to a room under the leadership of a man in black. Hey Lucy, how many are there? How much do you want? Dillons's icy voice came in through the palm-sized window, causing the people inside to be stunned. Such an amount is rare. The person inside glanced at Dillons and the two of them. The cat face mask blocked their faces, preventing him from seeing the information clearly. Then he took out one of his own. After looking through the information, Halu Stone, Rog Town, there are only 580 grams in stock at the moment. At the full price, I count you 15 million. After listening to Dillons, he didn't hesitate at all. I want a kilogram. The people inside were stunned for a moment, then smiled. Is this guest kidding? I said that the town of Rogue is only 580 grams. I also said, I want 1 kilogram. Dillons was firm and decisive, and he didn't mean to joke at all. Tristram pulled the former. He felt that Dillons was a bit hard for a strong man. After all, the man had already said the amount of stock. But the next moment, the words of the person inside made him stagnate for a while, looking a little surprised. 1 kilogram, 30 million. The words of the person inside were a little helpless. Deal, Dillons said without hesitation. After a quarter of an hour, the two of them left the underground trading floor. Drizzt asked Dillons curiously, how do you know that he will have a kilogram, and even the price is so accurate? He clearly remembered that at the beginning, Dillons asked him to win 30 million, which was obviously well prepared. If you come more often, you will find that there are many business people in this world who will not tell the truth. In fact, I only need 15 million to buy this kilogram of Halu stone. Down, Dillons said softly, holding Halushi wrapped in a cloth bag as if in his arms. What? Drizzt was a little surprised, and Dylan's words aroused his interest. After the two finished their main business, they began to wander aimlessly, but Drizzt seemed more energetic. He felt that his luck began to change for the better. Fate is smiling. Robin and Moria came to the largest library in Rog Town, where they could understand the true meaning of the world and allow them to realize their own value. The two walked on the bookshelf, swiping their fingers across the books, and their expressions were somewhat the same. At first glance, it looks like two sisters, with very different styles, but both attract the same crowd. But in the remote eastern corner of the library, there was an elegant, fair-skinned, black-haired girl with gold-rimmed glasses and a long pink dress. This woman has a delicate face, an oval face, and a slender figure. In terms of beauty, she is even better than Mariah. What's more attractive is her gentle, soft bookish quality. Turning over the book on the table, the woman's eyes rolled, and a little bit of agility flashed. She smiled, looking at the men around her who peeked at her from time to time, and said with a smile, "You have been peeking at me for an hour. I will now give you a chance. Whoever dares to confess to me, I can have dinner with him." "Wow, Asuna," Asuna said, "to give us a chance." Really, a chance to have dinner with Goddess Asuna. Who's going? I really want to go, but I'm ashamed of myself. I don't dare, I'm not worthy of her. She's so good, we don't deserve her. Woohoo. Some boys even cried. They wanted to come forward to confess, but when they saw the goddess, they couldn't even hear the courage to confess. Asuna waited for more than 10 seconds, but none of the nearly 100 boys present had the courage. A good-looking smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, then she closed the book and walked out of here lightly. Seeing Asuna leave here, people's eyes showed a sense of loss and some regret, but at the same time there was a sense of relief. This woman has such a unique temperament. What a wonderful woman. Robin and Moria couldn't help but admire this scene. They are women themselves, but they have to admit it. That woman named Asuna is indeed a very good woman. At this moment, young Ching walked to the center of Rog Town alone, standing on a road here, looking towards the execution platform in the center. Standing there, you can clearly see the high execution platform. At this moment, a complex light flashed in Yang Qing's eyes. In that year, the year One Piece was executed, he was still in the palace of the Tianlong people, and he was still young at that time. But he knew that it occupied any corner of the newspaper. He changed an entire era, turned the calm sea upside down, and sparked a new era called the Great Pirate. This is a terrible person, a hero who subverts the times. Step by step, I walked towards the execution platform. At this moment, it was empty. There were few pedestrians passing by. Only Yang Qing made the sound of footsteps when walking alone. In a trance, Yang Qing walked around, as if he was suddenly in the execution place where thousands of people were shouting. He saw One Piece kneeling on his knees, his hands bound by shackles, and 2 bayonets on both sides of his waist. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The uninhibited smile blooming on the corners of his mouth, the small mustache, the arrogance from the inside out, and the unique charm. Vision switching, he saw the red-haired young man hidden in the crowd, the red-nosed clown, and the middle-aged man with eyes and white hair. Their faces were full of tears, full of sadness. Want my treasure? Faintly, this sentence suddenly sounded, and Yang Qing was stunned. Chapter 63. Who will it be? He raised his head and looked at the high execution platform. The place was empty. Suddenly, a middle-aged man appeared. He had a small mustache and 2 bayonets across his waist. There was no fear on his face, but a smile and excitement on his face. Want my treasure? This sentence sounded again. Yang Qing's body trembled and trembled. The blood in his body was boiling, and infinite divine light flashed in his eyes, as if just such a short sentence could arouse the attack and struggle in the depths of people's hearts. The blood of the charge makes people passionate. If you want it, I'll give it to you, go find it. I put all the wealth of the world there. The man with the mustache had a big smile on his face. He was full of energy, and his voice came out far, far away, and clearly entered Yangqing's heart, causing him to tremble and his blood to flow faster. Suddenly, everything disappeared, the man with the mustache disappeared, and the execution platform returned to nothing. Yangqing took a deep breath and calmed down the impulse in his heart. That man seemed to have a unique charm by nature. His simple words, but his smile seemed to be demonic, with a terrifying temptation. Even he was about to fall. This is One Piece, Yangqing murmured. Everything just now was an illusion, but it made him immerse himself in the scene, and it seemed that he had really witnessed that exciting scene. Fortune, fame, power, the man who has it all, One Piece. The will passed down from generation to generation, the changes of the times, the dreams of people, these are all irresistible. As long as people continue to pursue the solution of freedom, all these will never stop. This is the world, the eternal theme, is freedom. Yangqing's eyes are bright, nothing can compare with freedom, nothing can stop a person's dream, if there is, it is only death. Only when a person dies, his whole body's blood is cold, his heart stops beating, freedom, and dreams will disappear. No, even death, dreams, freedom will not disappear. They will be passed down, endless human beings will give everything for them, the wildfire will not burn, the spring breeze will blow again, nothing can stop the will of the continuous inheritance, this is the flame of civilization, which will never go out. He walked forward step by step, reached the bottom of the execution platform, and stopped. Looking up at the high execution platform, he took a deep breath. Then he took a step forward, and he climbed this high ladder. Tattoo. Rhythmic footsteps sounded, and he stepped onto the execution platform step by step, and finally, he stood at the top of the execution platform. Standing there, he lowered his head, faintly seeing the dark blood stains that had penetrated into the wood and carved it. This is the blood of One Piece. He uses blood as fuel to ignite the flame of inheritance, so that he will never go out again. Here is where he ends. Yangqing closed his eyes, he could feel the hardships, soreness, and endless tears on this road. In this, otherwise it contains countless tears, blood, and dark blood that never wants to touch. But is he afraid? Are you afraid? Do not, won't. This is the path he chose, the dream he chose, and he will never give up. Suddenly opening his eyes, a fierce aura spread out from Yangqing's body, and the surrounding air suddenly twisted. With a sound, a circle of inexplicable aura spread around, and the plants in the flower bed below unknowingly bent over. The execution table began to shake, as if the whole world trembled under his aura. Domineering, armed, knowledgeable, he doesn't have a way to cultivate, and he fiddles with it, but he still can't get in. But this overlord is domineering, it is the awakening of talent, but he has practiced very skillfully in the past 6 years. There was no one around the execution platform at the moment, because Yangqing's aura didn't shock anyone else. If there are people, I'm afraid you can see a large crowd of people who are unconscious. Overlord is domineering. He narrowed his eyes slightly, looking in Yangqing's direction. Who could it be? A gust of wind blew, and Drago's figure disappeared here. This unique aura was noticed by the keen Drago. He was going to see what kind of person would have such an aura. Yangqing stood on the execution platform, and there was an empty street under the platform. He looked down quietly, as if he was experiencing everything that the king of this world had experienced. He saw tears, blood, pain, excitement, and ultimately hope. This person has experienced too much, but got too little. What is he for? The king who owns the world opens the door to the next era with his own life as the key. He is a hero, In the past, Yangqing didn't know why people had a comfortable life, but he chose to fight for the dream of nothingness, ethereal, and never realized. But at a certain moment, when he came to this world, he understood. If there is something meaningful in a person's life, he feels that he can do and work hard for the career that he can fight for his whole life. That feeling is happiness. It's satisfying, it's fulfilling. This is a dream, an ideal, and you can strive for it all your life. Yang Qing understood. He had a new understanding of dreams and freedom. At this moment, he had no regrets about giving up his identity as a heavenly dragon, and he even began to feel fortunate. Tianlongren is a supreme honor. He enjoys power, but at the same time, he represents the shackles. He locks people's hearts. Dreams will no longer take off, and they will become canaries in a cage. Those who are close to Zhu are red and those who are close to ink are black. What kind of environment can they create? What kind of identity? Standing in the cage-like palace of Tianlong people, how can there be such a comfort in the endless wide sea? That all-encompassing heart, King. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The temperament of a person can only be cultivated by the sea. Suddenly, Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and he raised his head to look at the lower left side of the execution platform. There, a figure rushed over in a panic. Woman. Yang Qing's eyes narrowed, and she took back her aura. She was a very beautiful woman, and she seemed to be born with a cherishing charm. The first time she saw her, she wanted to hold her in her arms and cherish and love her. She had an almost perfect face, fair skin and a slim figure. During the run, even if you panic, it also has its own distressing attraction. Moreover, the faint scholarly scent on her body, graceful and peaceful, made Yang Qing's heart tremble. Immediately after her, 7 or 8 big men with grinning faces appeared behind her. With wretched expressions on their faces, they were chasing the woman unhurriedly. Chapter 64 Dorag. You can't run away. Today, our brothers can enjoy the famous girl Asuna in Rog Town. It's a blessing for 3 lives. I'm very satisfied, very satisfied. Ha 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 ha. A series of lewd laughter rang out. On the execution platform, Yang Qing raised his eyebrows. Speaking of which, it's also luck, to see the goddess walking alone on the street, and there just happens to be no one around. This is a godsend opportunity. 7 or 8 grinning big men chased after Asuna with a smile. Asuna looked a little flustered. She was a girl after all. Facing this kind of thing, she couldn't help but think of what happened next, and she was afraid. Finally, Asuna ran to the bottom of the execution platform not far away. She raised her head and glanced inadvertently, and unexpectedly saw that there was someone on the high execution platform. Help! Save me! Asuna's voice was as crisp as an oriole, clearly reaching Yang Qing's ears. Standing on the execution platform, Yang Qing raised his eyebrows again, with a strange expression on his face. The big men chasing behind were nervous at first, but relieved when they saw that there was only one person. It turned out to be a hairless boy, scaring me to death. Hey, boy, let's go away quickly, we are the sub-malt pirates. Fuck you, don't get in the way here. The big men were very arrogant and scolded. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and a cold light appeared. His expression immediately became gloomy, and he stared at the 7 or 8 people below, and couldn't help but feel a little cold. But the next moment, when Yang Qing stood in front of them, the people of the Yamai pirates froze in their hearts. This guy is all right. Save me. Asuna ran behind Yang Qing, and a touch of fragrance immediately entered his nose, causing a glimmer of fascination in his eyes. The woman in front of him was indeed a very good woman, and he felt his heart beating a little faster. This kid is a little unusual. There are always few idiots who can be pirates. In a profession whose head hangs on his waist, he can't live long without a brain. These pirates have seen that Yang Qing is not easy. Go away. Yang Qing squinted and shouted loudly. A sudden loud shout, like thunder, startled the pirates. The next moment, they glanced at Asuna and seemed to feel that they couldn't hold their faces. It was stupid to launch an attack on Yang Qing. Looking for death. Yang Qing's eyes turned cold. He didn't even move the long sword around his waist, strode forward, and even didn't use his abilities. It's totally useless to deal with this group of scum. Why use a bull's knife to kill a chicken? After 3 seconds, the two sides began to contact. In just an instant, Yang Qing slammed his fist out, huge strength, and extremely fast speed, so that this group of pirates had no chance to react at all, and they were sent flying. 3 people, flying 10 meters away, and hit them heavily. In the flower bed, a large mouthful of blood spurted out. He shot fiercely and showed no mercy to the scum among these pirates. A good person is like a spring breeze when dealing with kindness, but as fierce as a beast when dealing with evil. This is Yang Qing. He has his own principles and his own persistence. Jumping up suddenly, Yang Qing kicked out 3 kicks in an instant. The 3 of them flew out again. Compared with these pirates, his strength was not a heavyweight at all. The pirates had no chance to resist. They couldn't even see Yang Qing's person, and they were already knocked out. In less than 10 breaths, 7 or 8 pirates lay motionless on the ground. Yang Qing glanced at the group here, the fierce light in his eyes slowly receded, and he returned to his usual casualness again. After that, he looked back at the beautiful girl, and when he saw a trace of fear flashing in her eyes, Yang Qing paused slightly, then turned around and prepared to leave. Wait a minute. Asuna was a little scared, but still spoke. This young man is amazing. The shot was fierce and cruel, and she was so arrogant that she could naturally see that the 7 or 8 pirates who fell to the ground were either dead or disabled, and they were basically seriously injured. However, this person saved himself, at least he should thank him. She's not the kind of ungrateful person. Huh, is there something wrong? Yang Qing asked suspiciously without looking back. If you have time, I want to invite you to a cup of coffee. Asuna was a little shy at first, but in the end she mustered up her courage and said bravely. Yang Qing paused, then nodded, yes. He was very fond of this woman. She was almost perfect. Her figure, face, and temperament were all at the top. Even Robin and Mariah were inferior. It was also with the idea of contacting him that he took action to save this woman. After all, he is not a saint, and when he encounters a woman who is heartbroken, his heart beats faster. When Asuna heard Yang Qing's answer, she blushed at first, then she mustered up the courage to come to Yang Qing's side to lead the way, inviting a man to be alone with her. This was the first time. The two stand together, one tall and the other short. The man is handsome and the woman is beautiful, and they look like a beautiful couple. But after taking 10 steps, Yang Qing's eyes suddenly shrank and stopped. What's wrong? Asuna asked curiously. Looks like it won't work today. Yang Qing said with a serious face. He looked directly at Asuna. You go first. Huh? Asuna didn't understand. Who are you? Yang Qing became alert, then said to Asuna, you stand aside first. Although Asuna didn't understand, she understood the situation on the field, and stood obediently in the field, looking at Yang Qing's eyes with a hint of worry. Visitor glanced at Asuna, a little surprised. It turned out to be Miss Asuna from the Farron family. The Phelan family is a famous nobleman, and they didn't expect to meet them here. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Who are you? Asuna asked suspiciously. Haha, I haven't officially met Miss Asuna yet. Under Monkey and Drago, it's the Major General stationed in Rogue Town. Drago said with a smile. Relief, it turned out to be Lord Dorag. Afterwards, Drago looked at Yang Qing. So, what are you doing here? The great pirate who is known as the god of death in the world, with a bounty of 100 million, His Excellency Lucifer, the god of death. Asuna's pupils shrank suddenly, staring at Yang Qing. He turned out to be a pirate. Chapter 65 _ Yang Qing's eyes narrowed, then relaxed. Just take a look. After all, this is where One Piece begins and ends. Haha. Drago smiled and then said sharply, since I met it, I can't pretend I didn't see it. I am about to meet the elites in the sea soldiers. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and his fighting spirit was high. Since his strength has improved, he has never fought against others. At this moment, when I met the future leader of the innovative soldier, my heart couldn't help but start to boil with enthusiasm, and the fighting intent was roaring. Under the execution stand, the two looked at each other, facing each other tit for tat. The two were equally young, but at the moment they both had serious expressions on their faces. They both knew each other and knew how terrible each other was. Although they have never played against each other, they will not relax in their hearts. Yangqing, needless to say, as a future leader of innovative soldiers, Drago is not weak even at this time, and is definitely no less than a general, although his rank is only a major general. And Yangqing, in the eyes of Drago, is also an unusual person. When he was young, he was able to speak words that were different from the voices of this world. Although he was a little naive and kind, it also reflected this person's integrity. Thought, he is different, and the real big man is born from such people. 6 years ago, he showed great courage again, declared that he was the enemy of the world, and then escaped safely under the hands of Aokiji. 6 years later, this person is like a dragon in the abyss, and now there is a flying dragon in the sky. Just a face-to-face, he felt the powerful power contained in that person's body. The wind picked up, and over the execution platform, clouds began to gather, the weather began to be as Drizzt had said, the clouds covered the top, and the thunder began to rumble. Yangqing's eyes narrowed and he was secretly alert. Drago's ability in the original book was strange and unpredictable, and this stormy weather was the symbol of his arrival. The next moment, Drago's figure suddenly disappeared from Yangqing's eyes. The latter's eyes shrank suddenly, surprised by its lightning-like speed. Boom! The light circle suddenly covered a radius of 100 meters. Yangqing's eyes narrowed, his head turned to the left, and at the next moment, a fist penetrated the previous position, bringing a strong wind. Without any hesitation, Yangqing clenched his fists, bent his arms into elbows, and slammed towards the back with all his strength. Bang! A strong force blocked the back, and a faint breath sounded, which was the breath of Drago. Before he knew it, he was already behind Yangqing. Boom! A flash of lightning struck, and the faces of the two reflected light and dark. The two began to stalemate, and the huge force confronted each other, causing the stone slabs under the ground to begin to shatter. So strong. This is the same moment, the thoughts in their hearts. The eyes were even more dignified, both of them were powerhouses who had cultivated their bodies to a terrifying realm. Drago's speed is so fast that it can hardly be seen by the naked eye, while Yangqing has an amazing insight. In an instant, both of them had a judgment on each other's strength. Next, the two separated, 5 meters apart, and looked at each other. They gave up the temptation. Yangqing touched the western long sword around his waist with his right hand, and then slowly drew it out. The weather became more turbulent, the lightning flashed on and off, and the rain began to fall on the ground, making it muddy. The next moment, the two figures touched again between the electric light and flint. Brush! Yangqing's long sword swept across Dorig's body, and while his pupils contracted, the sword swept across Dorig's body. But in the next moment, Dorig's body returned to its original state again, and then at the moment when the old force was exhausted and the new force was not born, Dorag threw a punch at Yangqing. Eyes flickered, Yangqing's wrist trembled, the long sword suddenly turned the tip of the sword, aimed at Drago's back, and then stabbed fiercely. Yangqing's speed is almost as fast as electricity. If Drago's punch hits the moment, this sword will definitely stab in his heart. At this moment, his body is solid. A fist swiped towards Yangqing's head, but the moment it hit Yangqing, it turned into a breeze. At the same time, Yangqing's long sword pierced Drago's body. Drago's figure faded and reappeared 10 meters away. Lightning reflected his serious expression. Looking at Yangqing, who was standing with his sword closed, Drago was very dignified. Reaction, speed, and strength have all reached the pinnacle. This person is very strong. Dorag said secretly in his heart. Between the electric light and flint, the two just fought with all their strength. In the middle, courage, speed, reflexes, and strength are all indispensable, and the test is almost all-round combat power. In the blink of an eye, Drago launched his own attack again, and his figure suddenly disappeared. And Yangqing also strode forward, and in a twisted moment, the figure also disappeared in place. The speed of the two of them was unbelievably fast, and their footsteps were constantly moving, splashing a large number of raindrops. The long sword and the fist intersected, and the huge power made both of them change color at the same time. A layer of pitch-black substance has been condensed on Drago's fist. There is no doubt that this is a domineering armed color, which improves attack power and defense power, and can have a certain restraint on the elementalization of nature. Yang Qing's long sword almost turned into lightning, and Dugu's 9 swords were superbly used by him. His figure was constantly on the ground, relaying, moving, and turning into a phantom. The two of you came and went, incredibly fast, and the sound of bang 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 continued to be heard, causing the entire execution platform to tremble. These two people. Asuna's eyes were full of shock, looking at the two people in the field. Her whole body was shaking. It was too strong, the power of these two people was too terrifying. She could clearly see the large fragmented slate in front of them. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. When hitting, the force of the bombardment is generated by the unloading force. Control yourself. Suddenly, Yang Qing's whole body trembled, and his consciousness was erratic. He began to enter the mode of the God's Eye, a marriage destroyer. At the same time, his consciousness was diverted, and he manipulated his body delicately, and even every cell was perfectly controlled. A flash of shock flashed in Dorag's eyes. He found that the speed, reaction, and strength of the person on the opposite side had tripled in an instant. In just an instant, a hole was cut in his chest, and bright red blood flowed out. Among them, he didn't even have time to elementalize it. What a terrible opponent. Drago couldn't believe it. He was very confident in his own skills, but because of this, he was even more surprised and shocked Yang Qing's strength. Quickly backing away, Drago looked at Yang Qing solemnly. What a terrible person, unimaginable, you are still so young. Aren't you also very young? Yang Qing returned to consciousness, and flicked the jade beads and blood on the long sword. Next, I'm going to do my best, you have to be careful. Drago's eyes narrowed, and he said seriously, otherwise, you will die. Chapter 66 Why Not to Change. In every battle, I will block the blood and life of myself or the enemy. Yang Qing said softly, his right hand suddenly rubbed, and a pop sounded, and the mask suddenly changed color and turned blue. I'm going to use all my strength too, you have to be careful. The long sword in his right hand stood horizontally, aiming at Drago, declaring his high fighting spirit. At this moment, Yang Qing was also full of firepower. The release of the blue mask means that his abilities have begun to be used. At this moment, Drago is in this mask. People or knives, I am fish. No matter anyone, standing in this mask means life and death, and even freedom is not up to him. The two of them raised their pace. This time they were very slow, and they seemed a little cautious, different from the previous speed. But with every step forward, their expressions became more cautious. The rain in the sky is more urgent, the lightning is on and off, and the rumbling sound seems a little manic. Suddenly, Yang Qing's eyes narrowed, and at the same moment, the opposite Dorag suddenly closed his eyes. In the next instant, the two of them opened their eyes almost at the same time. Buzz. The Overlord is domineering. The two powerful wills collided in the void, causing ripples to appear in the void. Asuna, who was watching the battle from a distance, trembled, and her consciousness went blank for a moment. Almost 1,000th of a second later, the two of them collided again brazenly, with the mind shocked by each other's domineering. The long sword and the fist intersected, making a creaking sound, and the huge force once again shattered the ground under the two of them, sketching a spider web-like crack. Wind. Drago suddenly spit out a word in his mouth. The wind was blowing, and the rain was blown towards Yang Qing. In just an instant, the wind turned into a strong wind, blowing Yang Qing almost unable to open his eyes. At the same time, the corner of his eyes saw that bright flash. Bright golden light, that is, lightning. With a clear target, the lightning struck him head-on. Standing in the field, I am the god of death. Yang Qing's eyes suddenly stared, and with a hum sound, the void trembled. In the next moment, Drago's eyes widened suddenly, and he saw an incredible scene. Elementalization. Drago chose elementalization, and he turned into a gust of wind, heading in all directions. The attack was dodged and the space returned to normal. When Drago appeared on the spot again, his expression was extremely solemn. He can already be sure that the person on the opposite side is definitely no weaker than a lieutenant-level naval soldier. Unless he uses large-scale combat power to completely eliminate Yang Qing, there is no way for him to rely on such a small-scale confrontation and battle. However, this is the town of Rogue, and it is impossible for him to disregard the life and death of the civilians and unleash all his power. Controlling the domineering arrogance of the king, and his own strength is so strong, this person is very dangerous. Do you feel it, Drago? Suddenly, Yang Qing spoke up. Drago raised his head and looked at the young man in front of him. The world is wrong. In the next second, Yang Qing said such a sentence. Drago's pupils shrank suddenly, he clenched his fists, and the cloak of justice behind him swayed recklessly in the strong wind. You have the power to change the world, why don't you go? Yang Qing said immediately, a smile appeared on his face, like a devil smiling. It is no longer fit to rule the world has its own right path to follow. What's your purpose? Dorag asked loudly. Is it a purpose? Yang Qing's eyes flashed with divine light, he seemed to sigh, I have no purpose, if I have to say it, it is the strongest. The strongest in the world. Then set things right and create a world I'm happy with. Think it's impossible? Yang Qing raised his eyebrows, you just don't dare to think about it. Then, Yang Qing looked at Drago's expression carefully, a trace of clarity appeared on his face. No, you have thought about it, right? You have long been dissatisfied with this world. Then why not change it? Drago's eyes changed, and his mood was messy. The next moment, he suddenly raised his head and shouted, stop talking nonsense. He stepped sharply and attacked Yang Qing. However, under this mask, Yang Qing's ability made him like a god, but he added a layer of imprisonment to Drago in an instant, slowing down his speed and easily dodging the former's attack, and then he put his right hand on Drago's shoulder. Beiming divine art, he secretly said in his heart, and a force of attraction immediately moved towards Drago's body. Dorag's face changed. What is this? He actually felt that his body was getting weaker. This kind of weakness that he could clearly perceive made him feel a little fear of the unknown in his heart. Immediately, Drago turned on elementalization and jumped 30 meters away from Yang Qing. You actually can absorb my physical energy, Drago said in shock. Yang Qing felt the power of qi and blood filling his body, and before he knew it, his body became stronger again, and a smile flashed in his eyes. Why not? The mystery of Beiming's magic is naturally impossible to explain to Drago in detail. Terrible person. In Dorag's heart, Yang Qing's threat had risen to a new level. He deeply knew what such strength, such a strange devil fruit ability, coupled with that amazing courage, represented. We're not actually enemies. No. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Yeah. With a strange smile in Yang Qing's eyes, he said softly, causing Drago to tremble. After receiving his abilities, Yang Qing walked slowly towards Drago. He naturally saw that the person on the opposite side had no intention of fighting, and he had been disturbed by his own words. In terms of strength, Dorag is indeed stronger than himself, and Dorag, who is full of firepower, is definitely not an opponent. After all, this is an existence on the same level as the three generals of Aokiji, a strongman capable of overturning the island. Do your best, that kind of terror is enough to destroy the world. However, he was not without the power to resist. In today's battle situation, he is invincible. Chapter 67 You are too dangerous. The rain gradually became lighter in the sky, and the dark clouds seemed to disperse. Yang Qing walked towards Drago step by step, and 10 seconds later he passed by Drago. From the corner of his eyes, he could clearly see the changing complex expression on Drago's face. There is no doubt that an earth-shaking change is taking place in the latter's heart at this moment. 3 seconds later, Yang Qing crossed Dorag and walked towards Asuna. He thought that Drago would not shoot again, but the next moment, Yang Qing's face changed and became gloomy. Do you want to continue? You can't keep me. His voice was very certain. Drago closed his eyes, then opened them suddenly. His expression was serious and his tone was heavy. You are too dangerous, whether it is your absurd dreams or your strange abilities, to the world, all too dangerous. Boom. The storm is coming, the wind is blowing, and the dark clouds are rolling over the entire rogue town. This time, wind and rain will cover the entire rogue town. Dorag, get serious. Then you have to block the entire rogue town. Yang Qing's eyes flickered, and she said coldly. Who knows? If I don't try to keep you, I think I will regret it in the future. Dorag strode forward. He is a decisive person. He made a decision and no longer hesitated. With the execution platform as the center, the wind howled wildly in a radius of 1,000 meters, and the thunder flashed continuously. As he moved forward, the torrential rain fell madly, seemingly roaring and roaring. Walking towards Yang Qing step by step, Drago's feet stepped on the ground, making a crisp and dull sound, and the rain splashed everywhere. Suddenly, Drago stopped, his eyes stared, and his hands trembled. The next moment, something terrible happened, and a look of panic appeared on Asuna's face from a distance. Yang Qing's pupils contracted even more. He saw the wind, rain and lightning in a radius of 1,000 meters, and he became violent at this moment. They merged with each other, intertwined, and formed a terrifying attack. In an instant, the flowers, plants and trees were destroyed and blown up and merged with the latter. This attack condensed almost all the elements that could be used at the scene. After a while, the attack formed a tornado that roared like a world, attacking Yang Qing. Crack! Yang Qing snapped his fingers with his right hand, and muttered at the corner of his mouth, "It seems that I have to use all my strength, otherwise, there is a real possibility of being left behind." With a sound of boom, a mask covering a radius of 300 meters appeared, including both Drago and that attack. Immediately afterwards, Yang Qing had a solemn expression, slapped his hands towards the ground, and let out a low drink. Get up. The boom rumble, ground began to crack, and then as if being manipulated, it surrendered to Yang Qing's hands, forming a mad dragon. Yang Qing then pulled out the long sword around his waist and stabbed 36 swords in all directions. The 36 swords that were stabbed turned into a little bit of light and flickered, forming a star-like attack. Then, Drago was shocked to see that his wind, his rain, and even the space was under the control of that person at this moment. What kind of ability is this? He had never seen such a strange and powerful ability that seemed to control everything. Go ahead, Drago, Yang Qing said with narrowed eyes. 3 seconds later, the huge attacks from the two sides collided, and a circle of light waves erupted, destroying everything within a 30-meter radius of the two. Drago ran frantically, his footsteps formed ripples in the rain, and the whole person turned into a shadow. Almost instantly, Dorag approached Yang Qing and punched the latter. Armed color. The jet-black weapon wound up, turning Drago's right arm black. Yang Qing's eyes shrank, and with a flick of the long sword, a sword thrust out, pointing directly at Drago's right arm. The reaction power and speed of the two have reached a terrifying realm, and the next moment, a fist and a sword touch each other. There was endless brilliance in Dorag's eyes. Yang Qing's face changed slightly, and he took 3 steps back. That huge power, he actually has the tendency to be unable to resist. A terrible attack. On the contrary, Yang Qing controls everything under his feet, around him, and touches everything, and launches an attack on Drago, but the latter's complexion is also not turned into nothingness. The attacking rhythm of the two of them was so fast that they were able to use it to the extreme. This is a wonderful battle, and for a while, you get down on me, and it's actually a dead end. It's useless for you, Drago. Yang Qing gasped. Drago ignored him and continued to attack. You can't risk the entire rogue town to deal with me. Your attack power is only at this level, at the highest level. Yang Qing continued, and at this level, you can't catch me. And, Yang Qing smiled, you seem to have forgotten that I'm not alone. Drago's eyes shrank, and his whole body suddenly turned into a breeze and floated outside the mask. At this point in the battle, he naturally has some understanding of the opponent's abilities. Yo, Captain, leave us alone, you are actually enjoying the fun of fighting here alone. A voice of laughter came, and a figure appeared on the roof not far away. In addition, this powerful Major General, who is it? Dylan's, why are you here? Yang Qing asked with a puzzled smile. Dylan's, who was squatting on the roof, tilted his head and looked at Drago, with a strange light blooming in his eyes. This Major General seems to be very powerful. His hand moved slightly, and the space trembled, and Dorag, who was standing 500 meters away, suddenly changed his face, his body turned into a breeze, and he left here. Just as he was dodging, the space where he was before suddenly trembled, and then returned to its original state. Space Department. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Drago's face became solemn. Looking at Yang Qing and Dylan's in front of him, he felt very troubled. Cut, Dylan said disdainfully when he saw Drago dodging, and then took a step forward. But the next moment he took a step, the person had disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was standing beside Yang Qing. Captain, you are very embarrassed. Dylan's eyes showed a solemn look. With Yang Qing's strength, it was incredible that he could be forced to this point. Fortunately, if you give everything, you should be able to kill him, but, I think, some old man will look for me desperately. Yang Qing said with a smile. Dylan's, you run so fast, you don't even wait for me, the dark clouds cover the top, bad luck is on the horizon, we have to leave Rogue Town as soon as possible. Drizzy's voice came from a distance, looking weak. Chapter 68. I like it. Another one. Drago narrowed his eyes and looked at Drizzt, who was wearing denim. Drago raised his eyebrows and said nothing. The situation at the moment is very bad for him. 3-on-1, and there is a close-up person on the opposite side. In this town of Rog, he was bound again, and his ability could not be used. It can be said that he could only exert less than 60% of his strength. A card appeared in Drizzy's hand. Facing the enemy, this unscrupulous gambler could still distinguish the importance of it. And Dylan's also pressed the dagger on his waist. Yang Qing slowly put the western sword into the scabbard, then looked at Drago and said seriously, it seems that we can only wait for the next contest. This battle is very enjoyable. Cut. Dylan saw that he was no longer fighting, and collected the daggers, while Drizzt showed the card to Drago, and then said a word with a smile. See soldiers, look, our cards are very small. Next, you have the upper hand. No one paid any attention to Drizzy's language. Yang Qing took a step forward and came to Asuna's front, smiling and said, it seems that I can only drink coffee next time. Ah, Asuna asked dully. She was frightened by the fighting power shown by the two just now, and she couldn't react for a while. Next time I invite you, Yang Qing said with a smile. Then, he turned his head and brought Dylan's and Drizzt together, and the backs of the three disappeared here. Drago looked at the three of them, his eyes flickered, but he didn't take any action. Are we going? Hurry up and get out of here, I have an ominous premonition, the cards are all bad omen, Drizzt feels trembling all over. Captain, is that your lover? The first sentence was Drizzy's muttering to himself, and the second sentence was Dylan's boundless joke. Well, let's go now. As for that girl, I quite like it. Yang Qing's voice came out clearly, and the expressions of Drago and Asuna at the back changed slightly. Asuna's face blushed a little, she didn't seem to expect to be confessed so inadvertently, and then she seemed to have made a decision, clenching her pink fist. HMPH, I said I would invite you if I wanted to. 15 minutes later, the entire crew of the Reaper pirates gathered on the Reaper. Glades came here panting with a large package on his back, while Robin and Moria were holding stacks of books with a look of satisfaction. Let's sail, then, I have seen the seamen come after us. Yang Qing sat on the bow and said casually. A large number of sailors poured out of Rog Town, shouting at each other, and chasing after the Death God pirates. Behind these densely packed sea soldiers, Drago's white cloak fluttered in the wind, the word justice shone in the wind, and his eyes flashed. He strode forward, towards the Navy warship. He still didn't give up. Such a dangerous person, Drago, in his current status, would not be able to release much water. At the same time, his heart is still unwilling, and the young man's competitive mentality is at play. Set sail, set off. Yang Qing shouted loudly, and the entire crew of the Death God pirates looked at the approaching sailors without a trace of worry on their faces. Set sail, Drizzt turned the rudder, and slowly sailed away from Rogue Town. Drizzt, get rid of them. Dillons shouted loudly, standing at the top of the mast. This is a bit difficult, Deputy Captain. Drizzt shouted, watching the 3 warships in the port also moving slowly, and patted his forehead. The Reaper accelerated, and the 3 warships followed closely behind. And just as they left the front foot, a wooden boat on the back foot also left the port. On the wooden boat, Asuna looked at the 4 ships in the distance, a hint of blush on her perfect face. HMPH, I won't let you go. That young pirate had left an indelible impression in her heart. At the port, 2 figures ran over anxiously and shouted loudly at the departing wooden boat. Where are you going, Asuna? Come back to me. Asuna was taken aback for a moment, then a smile appeared on her pretty face. Father, Mother, don't worry, I'm just going to pursue my own happiness. Come back. The cries of her father and mother sounded. Asuna smiled, turned her head, turned her back to her parents, and shook her right hand to say goodbye. Young men and women, for their dreams and happiness, are always willing to do anything. A woman like Asuna is extremely capable of autonomy and naturally has a stronger sense of independence. Soon, the Reaper and the 3 warships left the port. After a quarter of an hour, the town of Rog was already far away. Above the sea, the originally clear sky began to be covered with dark clouds, lightning flashed with golden rays of light, and traces were drawn, and the rainstorm was brewing. The weather is a little bad, Captain. I strongly object to sailing in such weather. Drizzt said loudly. The ship began to sway, and the sea was churning and undulating. Okay, I agree, turn the bow, and we surrender to the Marines. Yang Qing teased, making Drizzt's face dark immediately, and the others on the boat burst into laughter. Dorag, you haven't given up yet. Looking at the sky, Yang Qing's eyes flashed fiercely. Want to compete on the sea? Come on. Then, he turned his head and calmly arranged the tasks of everyone on board. Dyrants, watch out for their shells, don't let the fire hit the Reaper. Yes, Dillons shouted loudly, his whole body trembled, and the space around the god of death suddenly burst. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. A twist, shrouded in his spatial control. R.O. Captain, Luo whispered. Protect yourself. Yang Qing paused and said with a deep meaning. Luo Yi was startled, then nodded, yes, Captain. Others, hold on to the boat, don't be thrown off. Yang Qing said loudly, and then said deeply, tsunami, it's coming. The whole boat was startled, and the next moment, they saw a terrible scene. The strong wind blew violently. Above the sky, the torrential rain poured down, and even the lightning between the clouds slashed towards the death god one after another. Above the sea, a small tsunami also tumbled, causing the Reaper to shake violently. This strange scene, as if the whole world is against the death god. It's terrible, is the sea going to kill us? Glades said blankly, and the others were silent, also shocked by this scene. Above the warship in the rear, Dorag stood on the bow, looking at the pirate ship in front of him from a distance, his eyes flickering. Chapter 69 Bet with the warship. Major General, the cannonballs are ready, please launch. The sea soldier at the rear said loudly. Launch, Drago said immediately. Yes, the sailor saluted, then turned quickly. All attention, target, Reaper, launch. Boom 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 boom. A series of cannonball sounds were fired, and when it was about to approach the death god, it was swept up by the wind, rain and thunder in the sky, and then turned into a huge roaring beast, heading towards the death god. What's going on? Cannonballs, the cannonballs were rolled towards us. Drizzt said blankly, he had never seen such a sight before. The people of the death god pirates were stunned. Such a strange and grand scene is too rare to see, as if the weather on the sea was controlled and attacked towards them. The sea was roaring furiously at them, and then it even came to attack them. Brothers, let's meet this big scene, ha 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 ha. Yang Qing stood up. The attack from the sky, carrying endless power, had already struck, with a fearless smile on his face. The whole ship stayed for a while, and the next moment, they all laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, this scene is rarely seen in 100 years. I'm back home and I can brag. Tisk tisk tisk, the man who is the enemy of the sea is a good man, ahahaha. Dillons, Drizzt, and Glades all laughed, and Luo looked relaxed, including the two ladies, who saw this shocking scene without much fear. Because they have a captain who is not afraid of the sky and earth, and the appearance of not worrying at all infected them in an instant. In the end, the sailors on Yasna's boat were stunned when they saw the earth-shaking scene ahead, and then looked at the place where they were. The sun was shining and the wind was calm. How is this going? But less than a kilometer apart, the environment in which they are located is the difference between heaven and earth. They fought again. Asuna understood. She quietly looked into the distance. This time, it's on the sea. Boom. Yang Qing shot. His eyes widened, and a domineering king spread out, making the hustle and bustle of the sea in front of him appear a little calm, and then the blue mask quickly expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in just 2 seconds, covering the sea area with a radius of 1 kilometer. Then, facing the terrifying celestial phenomenon in the sky, Yang Qing stretched out his right hand. Here, I am God. The next moment, he showed his terrifying abilities. Within 1,000 meters, the roaring wind, the roaring rainstorm, the roaring thunder and lightning, and the powerful shells all paused. On the Navy warship, Drago's face became more solemn, and his fists were slightly clenched. Then, an invisible big hand appeared in the void. This hand had extraordinary magic power and could smooth out all the waves. This invisible big hand slowly brushed across the sky. After that, the gust of wind in the sky disappeared, the lightning flashes vanished into nothingness, and the torrential rain disappeared when it was dripping in the air. The shells shone brightly, and then burst into the sky like beautiful fireworks. 10 seconds later, the sky in this sea area returned to normal, and the undulating waves above the sea also calmed down. The previously frantic weather has become calm. The people on the Reaper were dumbfounded at this scene, their eyes shifted, and they couldn't help but look at the gasping figure in front of them. At this moment, Yang Qing's face was pale and his breathing was heavy, but his eyes were bright. He used facts to prove that the power of this fruit is no worse than that of the natural system, or even stronger. At this moment, he just developed the fruit to the second stage and it is already so strong. What if it goes further? What about reaching the legendary awakening? What will be the scene? Physical strength, it's still not enough. Yang Qing narrowed his eyes, facing up to his own shortcomings. The elements of the body cannot be slack off. You have to exercise step by step. There is no way to do it. But the opponents in the 4 seas are too weak, and the effect on Yang Qing is almost useless. You can only make another plan after entering the Great Channel. Dillons, move on. Yang Qing commanded, and then turned his eyes to the warship in the rear. A sharp edge flashed in his eyes. Come and don't be indecent, you all try my methods. Boom. The blue light mask shrouded here again, and then the sea began to fluctuate, and the blue dragons appeared behind the god of death, causing the crew above to stare wide-eyed. Wow, this is the boss's method, it's amazing. The sea has surrendered under the majesty of the boss, it's amazing. Really, a mighty man. Glades, Drizzt, and Law were all shocked, while Dillons watched quietly with a smile on his face. He knew that this was Yang Qing's new ability, and it was truly a terrifying power. Drago's eyes narrowed, and he was certain in his heart that at this time he really had nothing to do with the other party. His methods were resolved by the other party one by one. The ability on the young man was really strangely tight. He seemed to be able to control everything he touched, including the air, which was incredible. The invisible wind rose again and blew toward the giant dragon ahead. 5 seconds later, a large swath of seawater fell on the faces of the sailors, making them suspicious and fearful. "Hey, Vice Captain, can you send my card to their warship?" Drizzt suddenly laughed and said loudly on the Reaper. "Huh, of course you can. What do you want to do?" Dylan's wondered. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Asked, the figure flashed, from the top of the mast to Drizzy's side. "Come on, put these 3 cards on their boats," Drizzt said with a smile. "The weather is sunny, so it's a good time to bet. I want to make a big bet with them." Dylan's looked confused, but he didn't say anything. He took 3 cards, and his hand flashed and disappeared. At the same time, 3 cards appeared on the decks of the 3 warships. Fate is smiling. Victory is life, defeat is death. Let fate decide your life and mine. A card appeared in Drizzy's hand again, and a scarlet overlapping field of cards appeared under his feet. At the same time, a scarlet field appeared on the 3 warships in the distance, as if the cards were overlapping one after another, spread out to form a circle. "What is this? Solitaire?" A sea soldier found the strangeness here, and said suspiciously. When Drago saw the card, his eyes narrowed, his face changed greatly, and he shouted, "Be careful." Chapter 70 Welcome the new crew. On the Reaper, Drizzt showed his cards with a bright smile on his face. "Looks like I won." Boom. The 3 warships began to explode continuously, and the 3 seemingly simple cards actually produced terrible power, and the warships were blown into the sea. Damn it. Drago's face was very ugly, looking at the Reaper, which was getting farther and farther, and finally disappeared on the sea level. He still underestimated the power of that person, that strange ability, which seemed to be like a god, able to control everything. Moreover, the crew of that pirate ship also possesses terrifying power. This is a very dangerous pirate ship, and Drago has a deep understanding of it at this time. Haha, Drizzt, your ability can even bet on things that are not creatures. On the Reaper, Dylan's was stunned for a moment, followed by laughing. In theory, I can get everything by betting, including various behaviors, changes, etc. Drizzt said with some restraint, but the pride in his eyes could not be concealed. Haha, good, good, good. Dylan suddenly took out a bunch of grapes from behind and threw it to Drizzt. "Come on, turn it into gold." Drizzy's face darkened, and the others on the Reaper were taken aback and burst into laughter. Yang Qing sat on the bow of the boat, also smiling, with a pale face, replying quickly as time passed. The Reaper sailed in the East China Sea and completely got rid of Drago's warships. At 10 in the evening, Drizzt raised his eyebrows suddenly and shouted towards the top of the mast, "Captain, there is a boat following us." Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and he turned his head, followed by a glimpse. Through a long distance, he saw the woman standing on the wooden boat. "Is it her?" "Drizzt, slow down and let them approach." Yang Qing gave the order. "Okay." Drizzt winked at Dylan's, who was exercising beside him, and the 2 of them let out a low-pitched laugh, showing how obscene their expressions were. Luo walked at the bow of the boat, and then said softly, "Captain, is that your girlfriend?" A tic-tac-toe appeared on Yang Qing's face, and then he muttered, "The children of today are really not cute." The wooden boat gradually approached the Reaper. Asuna was wearing a long pink silk dress, with a slight smile on her face and a quiet temperament. She slowly stepped over the wooden board between the 2 ships and came to the Reaper. "Superior. You can see that on the wooden boat on the opposite side." The sailors looked at the crew of the death pirate ship with a terrified expression on their faces. "Why are you here?" Yang Qing tilted his head with a smile in his eyes. "Don't you want me to come?" Asuna asked with a playful smile. Touching his nose, Yang Qing didn't answer, and instead shouted towards the kitchen, "Cook, make a good meal, we're going to have a banquet, a banquet." "Okay, Captain," Glades shouted back, followed by the continuous chopping of vegetables in the kitchen. Then, Yang Qing looked at Dylan's and Drizzt, who were winking for a while, and said with a look of disgust, "You two give me a rough time and stand far away. And you, Luo, squat with them." Facing Luo in front of him, Yang Qing's face was also ugly, and this kid made his gloomy laughter from the very beginning. Asuna laughed secretly from the side, looking at Yang Qing's embarrassed expression. Then, "Our captain, is this your girlfriend?" Moria looked indifferent, but made a mocking voice. Yang Qing's face twitched. Just as she was about to speak, she was interrupted by Asuna, who said in a clear voice, "Yes." The former was stunned for a moment, staring at the perfect profile beside him. Asuna took Yang Qing's hand without any shyness, and made the latter's whole body tense, and then relaxed. "Yo, Captain, you're shy," Dylan said with a joke. Drizzt was blowing a trumpet, making a beep sound, full of smirks. Luo and Glades silently applaud. "You two, get out of here." Yang Qing kicked the two away with one kick. Then he also got up and admitted directly, "Yes, we both fell in love at first sight and liked each other. She is my girlfriend and I am her boyfriend." PFF'd. Robin laughed, and Moria couldn't help laughing. "It seems that our captain is so excited that he can't even speak." Asuna smiled. She didn't expect Yang Qing to have such a side. Very interesting. The banquet started immediately, not only to celebrate the union of Yang Qing and Asuna, but also to celebrate the victory of the battle just now. Afterwards, the Reaper set off again, heading towards somewhere in the East China Sea. "Captain, where are we going this time?" Drizzt asked. "Go to the Bucky Pirates and meet our new crew." Yang Qing showed a smile on the corner of his mouth, and then said strangely, "Bucky." Drizzt didn't ask anything, just said with a calm expression, "Then give me a specific direction anyway." "Orange Town," Drizzt shouted, and set off from here. Through the simplest method, he used cards to bet the direction of the destination. It was simple and clear, and he rarely made mistakes. A week later, the Reaper was approaching Orange Town in the East China Sea. In the original book, Bucky's pirate group is here. As for whether this period is still here, Yang Qing does not know. He is just gambling on luck. For Bucky, who is also a good friend with Shanks in the original book, he can be said to love and hate, and to be angry. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Sadly, he is also a trainee crew member on the One Piece ship. Others have become the top of the New World and one of the 4 emperors of the Peak. However, he has no ambition and is still here as a local rich man. It is a shame. Asuna, I won't stay in the East China Sea for too long. Yang Qing looked at Orange Town, which was approaching in front, and suddenly said in a deep voice, "I know that men in the sea will not stay in one place for too long." Asuna said with a smile. "You." Yang Qing suddenly didn't know how to speak. He felt that he owed Asuna for this. "Can you wait for me for a while? When I have a firm foothold in this world, I will come to pick you up, and then we..." Quote. Who knows? Before he finished speaking, Asuna blocked his mouth. "Bah, I'll wait for you." Yang Qing was stunned for a moment, then hugged Asuna tightly into his arms. The Death God pirates gradually approached Orange Town. Across the coastline, the crew could see what was being built in the town, the circus team. And, the one next to it, What is this? A big, elephant-trunked ship. It's ugly enough. The Reaper slowly docked, and then the entire crew, led by Yang Qing, began to disembark. "Come on, the crew of the Reaper. Go and meet our new crew." Chapter 71 Bad Crew. Okay. The whole crew raised their right hands and walked off the Grim Reaper, all smiles on their faces. Asuna looked at these people strangely, with a smile in her eyes. During the time she was on the ship, the people on the Reaper had left a deep impression on her. These young people seemed to have their own unique ideas in their hearts. A group of 8 people set foot on Orange Town, and the people in the town were immediately stunned. When they saw the pirate flag fluttering in the wind on the Reaper, their expressions changed greatly. Another batch of pirates. Oh my gosh. What's the matter? Do pirates like us so much? God, please take them away. The people in Orangetown sighed up to the sky, with tears all over their faces, watching Yang Qing's group keep approaching. With panic on their faces, they kept shrinking towards the rear. Boss, it seems that our new crew is not very popular with everyone. Dylan's laughed. The atmosphere of a boat is very relaxed, and in this small town, they don't need to be nervous. Where's Bucky? Glades asked with a smile, stopping a villager. The villagers were full of horror, and pointed to the location of the circus. Glades nodded and understood. Luo stood beside him, silent. Then, I'll leave it to you this time, Yang Qing looked at the crowd and pondered for a while, then pointed to Glades and Drizzt, just the two of you. As for Luo, you can follow them and take a look. Good. Luo Yi was taken aback and nodded. Drizzt scratched his head, and two words popped out from the corner of his mouth, trouble. Then the three of them left here, and Yang Qing looked at the crowd again and smiled. As for us, let's move freely, the new crew is here, we will leave here and continue to set off. Can I stay in the East China Sea for a year? After everyone left, Asuna suddenly asked Yang Qing's hand. The latter was stunned for a moment, pondered for a while, and then nodded. Okay, I also have something to do in the East China Sea. A beautiful smile appeared on Asuna's face, and then she tightened Yang Qing's hand. The latter's face was a little serious, and he decided to live up to this girl in his life. The two walked hand in hand in Orangetown. They came to the coast aimlessly, and then sat down on the beach leaning against each other, leaning on each other, watching the turbulent sea, and quietly feeling this peaceful happiness. Seagulls called, swam above the sea, making docile sounds. In front of them, a beautiful sunset picture of the sea was gradually outlined. Slowly, as the sun gradually went down, the shadows of the two merged together. On Glade's side, when the three came to the door of the circus that was being built and saw everything inside, their faces were already a little weird. The captain really came to let us tie this guy back. Drizzt said with a ridiculous expression. He felt so incredible, the red-nosed clown here, how could he look like a pirate? They had already made it clear that the short clown with the red nose was the man named Bucky. Naturally, with such an obvious feature, he would not admit his mistake, but the guy in it really didn't look like a pirate at all, instead he was more like running a circus. Even the people beside him were all dressed up, not like pirates. Such a person, the boss really sees it. Since the captain said it, let's do it. Glades twitched the corner of his mouth and said honestly, while Luo next to him held the sword and said nothing. Then let's go, Drizzt said. He didn't think it would be difficult, and the people inside didn't seem to have any strength. In fact, it was indeed the case. After Drizzt strode forward, he just threw a card, and everyone next to Bucky fell into the past. This bizarre scene shocked Bucky immediately. You, who are you? Our captain asked us to take you back. Glades walked over, and the devil fruit ability was used unconsciously. As he walked, Bucky's expression became more and more ugly, and he was about to suffocate. Why do I feel like he's dying? Take it easy. Drizzt said worriedly. I just drained the air around his head. Don't worry, he passed out and I stopped. I thought there was going to be a big fight. Drizzt smacked his lips and shook his head wordlessly, and Glades nodded tacitly. After a while, Drizzt stepped forward and lifted Bucky up, dragging him towards the death god pirates like a dead dog. When everyone met in a restaurant in Orangetown, Dylan's and others were a little surprised. So soon. This guy sucks. Drizzt pouted and dropped Bucky on the ground. Oh, let's talk when the captain comes back, Dylan said indifferently. After that, everyone gathered together and played separately. When Yang Qing came back, it was almost night. When everyone saw him holding Asuna's hand, they couldn't help laughing and whistling. Yo, our death god lover is back. Successful return from the honeymoon, the captain still remembers us, I'm really grateful. Oh ha, when will a little captain be born? Yang Qing's face was a little ugly, and then he roared loudly, you all fuck me. Asuna stood aside and laughed secretly, but at this moment, an untimely voice sounded. Who are you? Let me go. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. I am the great Captain Bucky. Crack. Without any hesitation, Dillons gave Bucky a slap and slapped the latter directly. When dealing with newcomers, Dillons will always be at the forefront of bullying. You dare to hit me. Crack. With another slap, Bucky's right face swelled up high. Ah, I want to kill you. You dare to hit me, I am a member of the One Piece fleet. Bucky is crazy. He just landed on the island yesterday, and then ordered the crew to build his own site. Who knows that the site hasn't been built yet? Two inexplicable people made him faint inexplicably. When he woke up, I have been tied up. What kind of crime did this Nima suffer? One Piece. The scene was quiet, and the eyes of everyone looking at Bucky changed a little. Are you afraid? Just let me go, Bucky said triumphantly, but his face changed again, and Dillons slapped him high again. Crack. This time, Bucky completely shut his mouth. Chapter 72 Red Hair. Yang Qing glanced at Bucky without saying a word. He sat down with a smile, raised the wine glass on the table, took a big sip, sighed with relief, wiped his mouth, and then opened his mouth. So, this guy didn't cause you any trouble, did he? He's too weak. Glades pouted. Bucky's face twitched, but he didn't dare to say a word. He can see that this group of people is definitely not a good person. No one would slap him as soon as he came up, especially the guy with a mean smile. He completely remembered it. Hee, that's fine. Yang Qing smiled and nodded. In the future, when you are on the boat, you have to train him well. At least, it can't be too bad. Does this guy have that potential? Dillons looked at Bucky with a weird look on his face. This kid seems to have no ambition. Except for his physical level, his willpower, courage, and ambition are all mediocre. It is difficult for such a person to become a strong man. It's okay, just beat him. Yang Qing said casually. All the people on the Death God pirate ship smiled, and Bucky's face on the ground turned black and ugly. Hey, what do you mean? Bucky finally couldn't help it and shouted loudly, catch me for no reason. To put it simply, our captain has taken a fancy to you, and from now on, you will be our man, understand? Dillons bent down and said seriously, with a swipe of his finger, the rope on Bucky's body was cut, allowing the person was stunned. When did I agree? Bucky growled. Ha 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 ha. The crew of the Death God pirates burst into a burst of laughter, making Bucky puzzled. Dillons burst into tears when he laughed, pointed at Yang Qing and said loudly, does this guy need the approval of others for the crew he recruited? Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. Bucky looked at Yang Qing, the latter smiled lightly, and he said with an ugly face, who are you? Death, Lucifer. Yang Qing said. Bucky was stunned for a moment, followed by a look of panic. He actually stepped back 5 steps in a row, and then sat down on the ground. You are that big pirate Lucifer with a bounty of 100 million. Quote. 100 million. Bucky clearly knows what it means in this East China Sea. It is an absolute sense of deterrence. Compared with him, the big pirate standing at the peak is the strongest among the real pirates. Ha ha ha, Captain, you scared him to the ground. Dillons laughed out loud again. This evening, the crew of the Death Pirates had a smile on their faces, and they celebrated loudly and sang songs. Only Bucky had an ugly look on his face. His hands were shaking all the time. Under the pressure of this group of pirates, he was very scared. He tried to escape, but every time he didn't run 10 meters, he felt suffocated inexplicably, as if he couldn't breathe and fainted. When he woke up, he was greeted by a slap from Dillons. After staying in Orange Town for about a week, the Reaper slowly left here. Heading towards other places, he began to drift aimlessly in the East China Sea. During this period, Yang Qing stopped the Reaper again and again on the islands that they passed through in the original book. Every time they visited an island, they would rest for a while. The Navy seemed to have received an order from their superiors. After encountering the pirate ship from a distance, not only did they not shoot, but they avoided it from a distance. This also made the Reaper calm all the way, without major twists and turns. In this way, a year passed quickly. Garp came to Rogue Town a day ago, took Ace away from here, and headed towards Windmill Town. When he returned to Windmill Town, he was shocked to find that the red hair actually resided here, and let Luffy have the dream of becoming the Pirate King. He couldn't help being very angry, and he became more determined to cultivate him into a pirate. You two, both of you will become the greatest sailors in the future, give me away your stupid idea of being pirates. In his rage, Garp punched Luffy and Ace each, causing them to scream in pain. Then, after Garp threw the two to Dayton, he left here again. And at this time, Yang Qing's Reaper began to slowly approach Windmill Town. He came to find Ace. He didn't know how old Ace was at this time. However, he had already reserved a place for Ace in his heart. Above the East China Sea, a leading ship was moving slowly, and its direction was exactly on the convective surface where the Reaper was traveling. That is to say, as the two ships continue to sail, sooner or later, they will meet. On the Dragon Head boat, a red-haired man stood at the bow of the boat, pressing one hand on the western sword at his waist, and the arm on the other side was completely empty. Behind him was a blond man with a long nose and a smile, while the other was chubby and ate the chicken in his hands. Captain, will that kid Luffy be a pirate? After all, his grandfather, but what about the sailors? Deputy Captain Ben Beckman asked with a smile. Yes, red-haired Shanks said confidently. Haha, bet. Beckman refused. Come on, I will definitely win this time. Shanks said loudly, his eyes were sharp. This time, I blocked an arm. Luffy, you definitely won't let me down. About 3 days later, a dark shadow appeared in front of the Reaper. Drizzt, who was a navigator, put on his binoculars and looked into the distance. When he saw the pirate flag fluttering in the wind, his expression changed slightly. Captain, we found the pirate group. Oh, Yang Qing opened her closed eyes. Check out the target on the opposite side. What does the pirate flag look like? Drizzt slowly said while observing. There are 3 long scars on the left eye of the skeleton. Then. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Behind the skeleton, are 2 crossed swords. What kind of pirate flag is this? Why haven't I seen it? Idiot, of course you haven't seen it before. This is a person from the New World. Dylan's face changed greatly. He came to the top of the mast, and looked into the distance. His eyesight was amazing, and he saw the opposite side getting closer. The pirate flag on the ship couldn't help but change. It really is them. Captain, it's a redhead. A smile appeared on Yang Qing's face, and he slowly stood up. Haha, isn't it? I never imagined that in this East China Sea, it would be such a coincidence to be able to meet one of the 4 emperors, the red hair. Bucky, Yang Qing shouted. Captain. Bucky immediately ran over with a look of attentiveness. During these days, he was tortured to the point of being helpless. The people on this pirate ship were better than him. He forced him to practice all day long. There is no resistance. But strangely, after these days, he didn't have the mentality to resist. Come and see your old friend. Now, he's a big man. Yang Qing's mouth curved, and said with a smile. Chapter 73 A Moment of Confrontation. Bucky was stunned, then stared blankly in the direction Yang Qing pointed. The next moment, his expression changed 360 degrees. Scent, Shanks. Haha, that's right, it's him. Yang Qing laughed, his eyes darkened after a while. I didn't expect that one of the 4 emperors who ruled the world, the red-haired Shanks, would meet here. Him. Luck, it's really good. Then, watching the red-headed ship in the distance getting closer and closer, Yang Qing stretched out his hand. Brothers, come with me to meet the legendary 4 emperors, the red-haired pirates, ha 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 ha. That's red hair, Captain. Dylan slapped his lips. It's a great honor to be able to see the legendary red hair here. Drizzy's hands appeared card after card, and his eyes became a little sharp. Red hair. A dignified look appeared on Luo's face. The crew members of the Death God Pirates have different expressions on their faces. In the face of this one of the 4 emperors who ruled the world in the New World, the red-haired Shanks, no one will treat him as ordinary. In the distance, on the approaching red-haired ship. Boss, look at that ship, it seems to be waiting for us. Beckman pointed to the Reaper with a playful look in his eyes. Oh, it's interesting. Shank's eyes flashed, looking at the Reaper. The wind suddenly picked up, and the people on the 2 pirate ships became alert. When pirates meet, it will never be peaceful, unless there is an old friendship between the 2. Otherwise, either indifferently guarding each other and passing by, or because of huge interests, the war exploded in an instant. Above the sea, danger and opportunity coexist. Pirates are a very risky profession. Some people regard them as adventurers, while others regard them as terrifying evil elements. Gradually, the 2 boats were less than 10 meters together, and the people on the 2 boats could already be clearly seen. Including the expression on the face, the spots on the clothes, it is clear at a glance. The 2 ships officially completed the face-to-face silent communication, and both were deliberately suppressing themselves and observing everything about each other. This pirate ship is not ordinary. At first glance, the redhead narrowed his eyes. He clearly saw the expressions on the faces of the crew members on the opposite ship. Yes, their faces didn't have all the awe, horror, or sluggishness of the usual pirates. Instead, there is an unspeakable confidence, excitement, and even eagerness to try. It's interesting, they want to compete with us. Beckman smiled. This is the Death God Pirates, the legendary ghosts of the 4 seas. They have been wandering in the 4 seas for a long time. Like us, they have also completed their exploration of the 4 seas. Yasuo said slowly behind his back. Huh, Shanks narrowed his eyes, then smiled, a very bold captain, a very bold pirate. He saw the half-sitting young man on the bow, holding a long western sword in his arms, looking at them with a casual smile on his face. And the other crew members on this pirate ship had no expressions on their faces, or a smile on their faces, without fear. I didn't expect to see Shanks, one of the 4 emperors, here. When the 2 ships were on the same parallel line, Yang Qing's voice suddenly rang. However, it seems that an arm has been lost. Huh, Shanks raised his eyebrows, and at the end of the Beckman pistol behind him, Yasuopi's face, including the others, changed instantly, and the muzzle was all pointed at Yang Qing. For a while, the scene entered a tense atmosphere, and war seemed to be on the verge of breaking out. Only Yang Qing and Red Hair looked casual, and seemed to be completely unaware of the strange atmosphere here, and they still looked at each other with indifferent smiles. Shanks. At this moment, an unexpected voice sounded. Shanks was stunned for a moment. He felt that the voice was a bit familiar. When he saw the red-nosed guy on the opposite boat, his face was full of disbelief. Bucky. Why are you here? The 2 pointed to each other and shouted in surprise to each other. With a wave of Yang Qing's hand, all the Death God Pirates put their hands away, the dagger on Beckman's neck disappeared, the cards on the deck also disappeared, and their faces returned to smiles again. Shanks also patted his forehead at the same time, and said to the people behind him, Haha, you can't let the younger generation look down on us. The people in the red-haired pirate ship all put away their weapons, but looking at the eyes of the people on the opposite side, they looked at them with admiration. In this world, there are not many people who dare to draw swords against them. Regardless of their strength, this fearless and timid aura has made this group of people stand out. The 2 boats stopped, and then a plank was erected between them. The red-haired and the others stepped on the wooden board with a smile on their faces and came to the Reaper. How is it? Are you welcome? The red-haired man walked to the middle, touched his head suddenly, and asked with a smile. Ha ha ha, naturally welcome, Glades, prepare the wine and food, and have a banquet. Yang Qing laughed and shouted back to Glades. Okay, boss. Glades ran into the kitchen. When Shanks stepped on the deck of the Reaper, Bucky asked Shanks loudly, Why are you here? You lost an arm. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and he knew in his heart that this arm must have been lost for Luffy. "How can you lose an arm with your strength?" Bucky said incredulously. "Then, the person on the opposite side is so terrifying." Fragrant. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Kes smiled and waved his hand, not minding. "I just threw it into the future of the new era." Bucky still wanted to talk, and then suddenly remembered something, and pinched Shanks' neck with both hands. "You bastard, return my treasure map, return my treasure, I will kill you." Shanks laughed. "Ha ha, Bucky, you haven't forgotten, you are too stingy." The atmosphere on the whole boat was particularly warm because of the slapstick between the two of them. "You guy, do you really know the red-haired Shanks?" Dylan's said incredulously. Beckman's eyes flashed, looked at Dylan's, and explained with a smile. "Shanks and Bucky were interns on One Piece Roger's ship before." "What Bucky said is actually true. I thought he was bragging." Glades said incredulously as he brought out the meal. "But, why is he so bad?" Chapter 74 Hometown Wine. At first, Bucky was still smug when he heard it, but later, his face became bitter, and he gritted his teeth. "You wait, I will become stronger, and I will beat you to death." "Yo, our Captain Bucky, beat us to death." There was a burst of laughter on the Death Pirate ship. At the beginning of the banquet, the people on the two pirate ships gathered together. They were all cheerful people. The atmosphere was very warm, singing and laughter continued to come out. The people on the Shanks ship were informal and had a lot of fun, and the people on the Death Pirate were also young people who were more playful. Drizzy's playing cards played a huge role at this time, raising the atmosphere of the scene to a higher level, while Luo said to Shanks solemnly, "If you can still find your arm, I can help you pick it up." "Up? What?" Beckman stood up in shock. He didn't care about drinking anymore. The other crew members also stood up in disbelief. "Boy, is what you said true?" Shanks' eyes flashed. Then without hesitation, he raised the big glass of wine on the deck, took a sip, let out a long breath, and exclaimed loudly, "Good wine." "Of course, hometown wine is the best drink, isn't it?" Yang Qing also took a sip and explained, "This is Beihai wine." "Have a heart," Shanks said seriously. "Of course it's true." Luo curled his lips in disdain and bit the chicken leg in his hand. "Luo is the best surgeon on our ship. Reconnecting a broken arm like this, well, it's a small matter, a trivial matter." Dylan's ran the train with his mouth full of blush, and went over to hug Luo, applauding, but he was pushed away with disgust by Luo. "Quick, quick, quick, Usopp!" Beckman roared, his face full of excitement. Usopp also responded, and hurriedly ran back to the boat, then took out a tattered arm, and ran over again quickly. "Little doctor, look, is this okay?" Beckman asked nervously. Speaking of which, Shanks' broken arm now has several parts of skin and decay, as well as a huge tooth mark, which looks really appalling. My arm, how can you have it?" Shanks was surprised. He remembered being eaten by that Sea King. "Don't talk nonsense, a Sea King, we can't handle it. As for your arm, we grabbed it back and wanted to connect it for you." "It's a pity," Beckman said helplessly. "How easy is it to connect the arm? The ship doctor on the red-haired pirate ship is naturally not enough to complete it." But what they didn't expect was that Ben had given up hope, but at this time, they found that it could be done. Luo frowned when he saw the tattered arm. "It can be picked up, but it is a little troublesome to restore the vitality of the arm." "I can do it with vitality," Moria said softly, adjusting her glasses. "That's fine." Luo nodded, then he looked at Shanks. "So, are you going to take your arm?" Shanks was about to shake his head to refuse, when Yang Qing suddenly said seriously, "Luo, don't ask about this kind of thing, let's start." "Understood," Luo replied simply, and then he pinched his fingers. Boom. The light shrouded the deck, and Shanks' arm floated up. People looked at this mysterious scene with amazement. The next moment, the broken arm turned around and flew towards Shanks' empty arm. It was only for a moment that the two came into contact, and Shanks' expression immediately after a change. His face trembled, he picked up the wine glass in his other hand and drank it. "That's cool," Shanks shouted. "Cheers." Yang Qing raised his glass, collided with Shanks fiercely, and then swallowed. And here, Moria walked out holding her small suitcase, tilted her head and said to Luo, "Luo, gouge out all the rotten flesh on his arm." "Yeah." Luo nodded, with a pinch of his right hand. Shanks' face trembled again, sweat came out of his forehead, and a small mass of rotten flesh appeared in the air, and then fell into the sea. Moria walked over quickly, took out the scalpel, fine needles, and various colorful medicine powders from the small suitcase, and began to move on Shanks' arms. The operation lasted for a full hour. Luo controlled his ability and cooperated with Mariah. Both of them were solemn and serious. When Shanks was injured and the first drop of blood began to fall on the deck, everyone was shocked. Eyes lit up. "It's done. The blood is circulating, and this arm has been connected." Moria stabbed the arm with fine needles, and then used gauze to explode the damaged area. After wiping the sweat on her forehead, she said softly, "Within a month, this arm will know feeling, 3 months later, back to normal." Quote. 4 months. Shanks' face was also a little ugly. He was in pain. When the blood flowed, the heart-piercing pain almost made him, a strong man, shout out. "It's great." Beckman and others looked excited. For pirates, breaking an arm will undoubtedly cause huge damage to combat effectiveness. The first is balance, and then strength, speed, and other aspects will be affected. The human body is a whole, and if one part is missing, it will cause huge damage to the whole. At night, Shanks sat beside Yang Qing with gauze on his arm. "Thank you very much, the god of death," Shanks said with a smile, "and no one really wants to lose an arm, unless it's a fool." Nothing. Yang Qing. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Smile on his face, he looked at the ladder and said, "Anyway, it's also the 4th emperor. Losing an arm is a bit too rude, isn't it?" "Ha ha ha, you're right, it's too rude." Shanks was stunned and laughed. After a while, Shanks suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" "Windmill Town." Yang Qing didn't hide anything. "Windmill Town." Shanks narrowed his eyes. "Why? As far as I know, it's just an unknown town. My crew is there," Yang Qing said. "Oh, who is it?" Shanks wondered. "Ace, Portgas d'Ace," Yang Qing said seriously. "Who is that?" Shanks wondered, but since the target wasn't Luffy, he was relieved. To tell the truth, he was sitting next to this young man, and there was a trace of heavy pressure. This surprised him a little, and was a little surprised by the latter's strength. "You will know later," Yang Qing smiled. "Well, tomorrow we are going to go to the New World." Shanks sighed, then stared at Yang Qing and said, "We will wait for you in the New World. When the time comes, I will invite you to drink good wine." "Hometown wine is good wine," Yang Qing said with a smile. "Where is your hometown then?" "Mary Joa." Chapter 75 _ Shanks narrowed his eyes, and then smiled. "The wine there is not easy to get." "Yeah." Yang Qing also sighed. "It's really not easy to take." "You have a problem for me." Yang Qing smiled and then said, "So, I will go there first to see if the wine in this holy place is easy to get." Shanks' pupils shrank, and then he said, "What a spirit. There are people who will kill. I'm waiting for you in the New World. I believe you won't let me down." Shanks said solemnly. "Of course." Yang Qing nodded, "Very sure." Then, the two fell into silence. After a while, Shanks suddenly thought of Bucky and said, "Bucky, I'll take care of you. He won't be too weak in the future, and his reputation will soon be heard." Yang Qing said with a smile, "One Piece's crew can't be a puddle of mud." "Okay." Shanks was stunned and said gratefully. After that, Shanks left, and after a while, Asuna came to Yang Qing's side. "This captain is a very good person. I can't believe that his reputation is so great," Asuna said curiously. "Real heroes, have no high or low in their eyes, because for them, people in their eyes are the same. The weak and the strong are not eternal. Everyone has weak times, and everyone will be strong. Chance, Prince and General, would you rather have a seed? Yang Qing said with a smile, his eyes flickering. Nobles are different. Asuna smiled playfully. So they are nobles, not heroes. Yang Qing said. Actually, I also like the hero. Asuna said strangely. Ha ha ha, good. Yang Qing laughed loudly. Heroes will die, only those who die are heroes, but I will not die. On the second day, the red-haired pirates set off and said goodbye to Yang Qing and his gang. This is how the men on the sea are. When they are together, they are sincere, but when they leave, they are very dashing. The Reaper continued to set off, heading towards Windmill Town. With Drizzt, who is guided by the sky, they don't even need a chart, they just need to know the name of the place. The magic of the Devil Fruit's ability has been deeply reflected at this moment. After about a week of sailing, the Reaper was approaching Windmill Town. At this moment, Drizzt stood on the mast and shouted, "Boss, it's not good, there are sailors." Huh. Yang Qing narrowed his eyes and looked at the place Drizzt pointed. I saw that about 3 miles away from the Reaper, a naval warship was sailing fast on the wind and waves. There were not many Hucheng troops on this warship, and its scale was not large, but when Yang Qing saw clearly the man standing on the bow. When he was human, his eyes narrowed and his pupils shrunk. Soon, the two ships approached quickly. When the warship was only 10 meters away from the Grim Reaper, Yang Qing suddenly stood up, then bent down deeply. He actually bowed to the warship and saluted. Boss. On the Reaper, all the members were inexplicably shocked. In front of the warship, the burly middle-aged man with his eyes closed seemed to sense it. He opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was the figure of Yang Qing bent over. It's you, Lucifer, what is this for? Thank you for saving your life. Lieutenant General Garp, Yang Qing said solemnly. A big man walks on the sea, with clear grievances and grievances. If he has revenge, he will repay him. If he has kindness, he will return. He is not the kind of bad guy, but the principle in his heart makes him a strong man. Ha ha, don't worry, you are really polite. Karp shook his head and smiled, and then asked, where are you going? Windmill Town, go see Ace. Yang Qing didn't hide it. What? Garp shouted anxiously, I tell you, Lucifer, Ace is going to be a sailor, the greatest sailor, don't mess with me, otherwise, I'll never finish with you. You have nothing to do with Ace. Yang Qing smiled and said, the blood flowing in his body is not meant to be a naval soldier. You. Karp's pupils shrank, looking at Yang Qing in shock. At this time, the two ships had passed by and quickly separated. Above the warship, Garp's roar came clearly. Ace, you can never be a pirate. Boss, that lieutenant general is the hero Karp. Dylan said in shock, and the others stared at him with dumbfounded expressions. Yes, he once saved the lives of me and Dylan's. Yang Qing glanced at Dylan's and said lightly. Everyone looked at Dylan's, who shook his head violently. I'm in a coma, I don't know anything. On Karp's ship, he turned around and looked at the Reaper that was getting farther and farther. Karp shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, young people today, really. He took a bite of the donut and said in a slurred voice, damn it. Lord Lieutenant General, aren't we going to arrest them? That's the notorious death god pirates. Behind him, a 2-meter-tall Major General whispered. Arrest for what? Didn't you see him respecting me so much? Cap snorted, then turned his head and walked into the bedroom. The Major General shook his head with a wry smile, completely speechless. However, Garp's temper is clear, and naturally he won't talk more. This old guy has a loose personality and does things according to his preferences. Even the Warring States period can't control him. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The Reaper continued to drive, and after half a day, it began to approach Windmill Town. When the residents of Windmill Town saw that the pirates were coming again, this time they were no longer afraid. Instead, they rolled their eyes and continued to do their own thing. For this scene, the people on the Death God pirates looked at each other in dismay, very surprised. Well, let's sit down at a bar first. I heard that there are bandits here, so be careful. Yang Qing clapped his hands, and then stepped off the Reaper. The people behind all walked down with a smile. For Yang Qing's words, there is no one who cares. Bandit, what it is. After getting off the boat, the crew scattered, while Yang Qing walked towards the town with Asuna. He pulled over a villager, and after asking about Dayton's house, he walked up the mountain with Asuna. Are we going to find that guy named Dayton? Asuna asked. Yes, my goal is there. But just now, the villagers said that person is a bandit who does all kinds of evil. Asuna asked strangely. Good and evil are relative, he is indeed evil, but there is still kindness in his heart. Yang Qing explained with a smile, besides, we are not looking for him, just the person we are looking for is with him. Asuna nodded and stopped asking questions. Chapter 76_. The two walked up the mountain along the mountain road. Dayton, the bandit, lived in a remote place, but he was not with the residents of the town. After walking for about half an hour, Yang Qing and Asuna saw the empty yard. From a distance, it was quiet and there seemed to be no one here. When they got close, the two looked at each other, and they only saw a chubby, ferocious-looking, burly woman. Who are you two? Dadan asked fiercely when he saw the two of them. I'm here to find Ace. Yang Qing said with a smile. Not here. Dadan ignored Yang Qing. Leave here quickly, or I will kill you. Yang Qing was stunned for a moment, then shook his head helplessly. This guy is really bad. Garp once hailed the Dayton family as a vicious bandit, and the sins committed are irreparable no matter what, and Yang Qing, who has read the original book, naturally knows that this vicious bandit on the surface also has his kind side. Pulling Asuna, Yang Qing left the place. He began to head towards the depths of the mountain. Ace was not here, so he must be in the mountain. There are many beasts there, and he knew from reading the original book that sometimes Ace would go and get food by himself. Where are we going? Looking at the calm and deep forest, Asuna seemed a little scared. I don't know, maybe I'm lucky enough to be able to find my target. Yang Qing shrugged and said with a smile. The next moment, he was greeted by Asuna's delicate fingers. Baring his teeth and grinning for a while, Yang Qing regained his senses. They had been walking in the jungle for an hour before they heard a few voices. Speaking of animals in this jungle, there are really not many animals. After reaching the depths, you can see one in almost a few steps, and it is extremely ferocious. Looks like we have found them. Yang Qing raised her eyebrows and heard loud voices, it's just that they seem to be in trouble. There was a hint of curiosity in Asuna's eyes. She seemed to hear the screams of a child, and she was a little scared, but after hearing the voice of the person next to her, she relaxed. Go and have a look. And at this moment, the birthplace of sound. Tell me now, where the hell did that kid hide the money he stole from Lao Su? Asked Borsemi, his head about to explode with anger. It's a shame that the money you've worked so hard to save has been stolen by a few brats. Luffy on the ground looked in pain, but when he heard his words, he shook his head firmly. Don't tell me that labor and capital killed you. Borsemi kicked Luffy fiercely a few times with great strength, and the man next to him grinned, causing Luffy's face to show pain, but the latter still roared loudly, I won't say it, and I won't say it if I kill you. In the grass not far away, there was a sound of hurried footsteps, and Borsemi looked up, his eyes lit up immediately, this kid stole my treasure. The subordinates also looked at them. Immediately, the figures of Ace and Sabo came into their eyes. They couldn't help but grinned and walked over slowly. Seeing these pirates, there was a trace of tension in their eyes, but they were not afraid. They glanced at Luffy on the ground again, and Ace shouted, Save Luffy. Just when they were about to act, the pirates suddenly stopped, their eyes seemed a little dull, and they looked stupidly behind Ace and Sabo. What's wrong with them? Sabo was stunned for a moment and looked behind him. Then his pupils contracted violently, and his heart beat fast. This man. He saw a man with a casual smile on his face, walking forward step by step like that. His speed is not fast, his appearance is not fierce, but he is very handsome, but his body exudes a domineering aura. As he gradually moved forward, that momentum gradually became extremely terrifying. Ace also stopped. He looked at the man in shock. As he moved forward, Ace noticed that even the flowers and plants on the ground seemed to be bending over. They were surrendering. He saw above the big tree, there were signs of severe oppression, as if all of a sudden, everything here was going to be distorted. No one knew what was going on, but at this moment, all the people present were surprised to find that they couldn't move. They could only stare blankly at the man moving forward. Above their hearts, a heavy touch appeared. The pressure makes the sweat on their foreheads come out quickly. Such pressure seems to be the natural pressure of low-level creatures when facing high-level creatures. Even if it's wrong for them to steal treasures, but as pirates, your hearts are not as vast as the sea. Really, the garbage among the pirates. The man who approached step by step said these words with a smile on his face. Immediately, Borsemi's face changed greatly. He became angry, and shouted, "You stinky boy, what are you talking about, But before he could finish his words, Yang Qing's eyes narrowed slightly, and a strong will and spiritual force rushed out of his body, covering him directly. In just an instant, the fragile will of the pirate was completely destroyed, and then he fell headlong. On the ground, the eyes turned white, and the other pirates also fell one after another. What happened? Ace said in horror. Everything in front of him was too strange. He looked at the man walking over, and said incredulously, "Is that you? Want to have such power?" The man glanced at the three who were still awake, and suddenly laughed. "What?" Ace shrank his eyes and shouted loudly. 3 hours later, Yang Qing was sitting in a bar in the town drinking heavily, sitting next to him. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Little Ace, Dylan's, Glades, and Drizzt laughed and pointed at Ace Road. "So, Captain, is our new crew member a kid younger than Luo?" "Ha ha ha ha," Dylan said slightly mockingly. The corners of Ace's mouth trembled, and there was a trace of anger in his eyes. He rudely shouted at Dylan's, "You are the brat, I am a pirate, a pirate." "You are not a pirate," Luo said seriously, "pirates will not steal things." Ace stayed for a while, then didn't speak. "Pirates will grab it," Luo said immediately, causing Dylan's and the others to burst into laughter that shook the entire bar. Ace's eyelids trembled, and he suddenly realized that the group of people in front of him were insane. "Yes, as pirates, we won't steal it. Righteousness, righteousness, do you know? What we want, we grab it righteously," Dylan said with a smile, but the smile contained seriousness. "This is the pirate, you boy." "Ha, it's still a long way off. He is not yet our crew member." At this moment, Yang Qing, who had been drinking silently, suddenly spoke up, making the audience quiet. Chapter 77 "What?" Ace asked incredulously. Dylan's and the others also looked at Yang Qing with doubts in their eyes. Bucky would keep stuffing food into his mouth and spit it all out, and then he said loudly in a young voice. "Captain, are you kidding us? You pulled this guy back and said he wasn't our crew." Yang Qing didn't say anything. He stretched out his hand to touch Ace's head, but the latter avoided him angrily. After a slight stun, he explained with a smile, "You are still too young now. In the future, we will come to pick you up." "I don't want you to pick it up," Ace shouted angrily, then drank the drink on the table in one gulp. He is really annoyed now. To be honest, this group of pirates who are not much older than him has indeed left a good impression on him. He likes the relaxed atmosphere between them, which makes him very natural. He can't screaming loudly and laughing loudly. And the person in front of him who saved him and Luffy Sabo brought him a sense of closeness. Yang Qing suddenly smiled. He slowly stretched his hand to his waist, then took off the long sword and put it into Ace's hands seriously. Dylan saw this scene, his mouth opened wide, his eyes full of incredible. "Old boss, this is, but your sword." Drizzt said loudly. Everyone was shocked and confused, including Ace, who was also dazed and slightly sluggish. This sword, for you. Yang Qing said solemnly, and then stuffed the Western sword into Ace's arms. He was the trophy of the first battle in my life, and now, I will give it to you. Me. Ace didn't know what to say for a while. Although he didn't know what the sword was called, he knew the sword when he saw the expressions on Dylan's and the others' faces. It is very important to Yang Qing. I can't have it, it must be very important to you. Including Yang Qing, everyone was stunned, and then a smile appeared on their faces. At this moment, they somewhat agreed with this silly boy. No matter how important the sword is, it's not as important to me as you. Yang Qing said with a smile, we will pick you up when you go to sea at the age of 17. Remember, you are a member of the Death God Pirates. Ace took the Western sword seriously, and then clenched it tightly in his hand. What is this sword called? It doesn't have a name. If you can call it the Sword of Promise. It's a common name, but it represents the agreement between us. Yang Qing said with a smile. Sword of Promise. Ace slowly pulled the long sword out of the scabbard. He saw a cold light, and the strange gems embedded in the sword. The two merged together and had an inexplicable beautiful color. Staring blankly at this beautiful Western sword, after a while, Ace suddenly smiled. I've decided. Everyone looked at him strangely. I decided that when I go to sea, I will form a pirate group that is no weaker than your pirate group, and then I want to be the pirate king. Dylan's and the others were all sluggish, and then it was Bucky this time, who rudely gave Ace's head. You stinky boy, do you know what you are talking about? That is One Piece, yes One Piece. I don't care, I'm going to be, you red nose. Ace roared loudly. What did you say? Bucky's body burst into flames with anger. I said you had a red nose. Ace said rudely. You stinky boy. Then the two scuffled together, causing the people next to them to laugh. After waiting for a while, the two sat on the ground panting and stopped. When you are 17, we will come to pick you up, Ace. Yang Qing said seriously. Ace snorted and muttered in a low voice, I want to form my own pirate group. Yes, then our pirate group will be very big. You can do, how many teams? Just do it, the captain of the second team, how about it? Yang Qing was stunned, laughed. Bucky next to him said proudly, boy, I'm the captain of the first team. Cut, Ace spat in disdain. A week later, the Reaper departed from Windmill Town. When parting, Ace held the beautiful Sword of Promise tightly and looked at Yang Qing and others on the Reaper. I will definitely find you guys, with my pirate group. On the deck, Yang Qing and others kept waving towards Ace. Why not recruit him directly to our pirate group? Dylan's asked suspiciously on the boat. He still has his own unfinished chance. Yang Qing said mysteriously, making the ladder cut. After leaving Windmill, the Reaper's goal was clear. Sitting cross-legged on the bow, Yang Qing lost his long Western sword and leaned directly on the bow, still looking lazy. Drizzt, aim at the Great Channel, go. Yang Qing's lazy voice came from the bow of the boat. Drizzt responded, and then turned the rudder with great interest. The sails of the Reaper bulged, making deep marks in the sea, and moving forward quickly. A month later, the Reaper approached Rog Town, where Yang Qing and Asuna parted. Wait for me, it won't take long. Yang Qing hugged Asuna and promised softly in her ear. I believe in you, I can't wait, I'll go find you. Asuna said obediently. Hearing the woman in his arms say this, Yang Qing tightened his body and then firmed up. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. Tun said, I won't let you do such a dangerous act, wait for me in Rog Town, believe my news, it will be in your ears soon. Good. After a day's stay in Rogue Town, the Reaper continued to set off. This time, without any delays, the ship headed straight for Upside Down Mountain. A month later, the Reaper came to the bottom of Upside Down Mountain. Under Drizzy's skilled operation skills, the Reaper rose into the sky amid the cheers of Bucky. Half an hour later, the Reaper cut through the sky and plunged towards the Great Channel. The entire crew of the Reaper stood up and gathered. Ha ha ha, everyone talks about their dreams. Yang Qing laughed loudly. I'll come first. I, Lucifer, want to be the strongest in the world. Dylan's, my dream is, Dylan's glanced at Yang Qing. Since the captain's dream is to be the strongest, then I will become the strongest deputy captain. I'm Drizzt, and my dream is to travel around the world and see gambling all over the world. I am Glades, and my whole life, I will carry on the family's last wish and become an excellent chef. I'm Luo, I'm going to find that person and kill that person. Everyone looked at Luo and couldn't help but tremble. This little guy has a lot of murderous aura. I'm Robin and I'm going to travel the world and find out the truth of the world. I'm Mariah, and I'll read books all over the world. Everyone looked at Moria with strange eyes. This perfect goddess had such a crazy dream, which really surprised them. I'm Bucky, I'm going to be stronger. Then challenge Shanks and beat him to return my treasure map and my treasure. Bucky shouted loudly. Yang Qing strode to the bow of the boat, looking at the sea where the Reaper was pulled out of the white waves in front, and said confidently, okay, let's enter the Great Channel. Then, rule the world. Chapter 78 Galokas. The Reaper swooped in a graceful arc in the sky, then fell headfirst into the lower channel of the Great Channel. Then, the sails rose suddenly, the speed of the ship suddenly increased, and the huge wind blew towards the crowd, deforming their cheeks. Chuan yuan men fa chu bian sheng da da han sheng, ying jie da feng, ta men mian dai xiaorong, ri shui fei teng, xin zhang ji dong moming. Finally, it's time to enter the Great Channel. Drizzt clutched the rudder tightly, looking very nervous. For pirates from all over the world, the Great Channel is undoubtedly a huge challenge. There is a paradise where only the strong can survive, and the weak will have no room for survival. He has seen countless pirate groups that broke into the Great Waterway and returned with a sad face. 10 people went, but only 2 or 3 came back. Countless pirates came here with longing and dreams, but left here with pain and despair. Compared with the 4 seas, the competition here is more intense, bringing together the best pirates in the 4 seas, and the Great Channel is more cruel and bloody than the 4 seas. After the sprint told by the Reaper, when it traveled the entire downstream river course, it suddenly stagnated and stopped listening. The people on the boat were unsteady and fell to the ground. Drizzt, don't you know how to slow down? Hit me, Bucky roared loudly. It's you who didn't grasp it. Drizzt retorted unceremoniously. Everyone stood up, shook their dizzy heads, and looked around. This is Twin Points, the entrance to the Great Channel, Drizzt said with a smile, seeing everyone's confused faces. Unlike the 4 seas, the navigation direction in the Great Waterway is determined by magnetism, and because of the magnetism, the terrible weather conditions of the Great Waterway are caused. For those who sail, the danger is not only the more elite than the 4 seas marines, pirates, and the turbulent climate are also an important factor. Quote, there are countless pirate groups, maybe because of a storm, a tsunami, or a tornado, they will fall into the endless abyss. And in this mysterious and dangerous channel, because of magnetism, we actually have 7 choices for the next channel, and in the second half, it will become 5, and finally gather together to complete a gathering. Drizzt explained with a smile, and everyone nodded to understand. Yang Qing's eyes flickered, and what Drizzt said, he naturally understood that the description of the Great Channel in the original book was very detailed. This terrifying and eerie channel has claimed countless lives. Only the strong can stand here. The weak have no place to live. And if you want to start sailing in the Great Channel, there is another very important thing, that is, record the pointer. Drizzt just said here, he said loudly, if you want to sail on the Great Waterway, you must have a recording pointer. On each island of the Great Waterway, we need to stay for a period of time until the pointers after the magnetic recording is completed, the direction of the next island will be displayed. Quote, it's really mysterious. Great Channel, looking forward to it. I really want to see more powerful sailors and pirates. and the changing climate. The crew members chatted happily, and finally Moria suddenly said, I heard that there are also islands floating in the air, where a group of humans with wings lives. Wow, really? An island in the sky? Winged man, isn't that an angel? Really, it's amazing. We must go. The members of the Death God Pirates laughed loudly. They were full of expectations for their future voyages. Human beings are always full of curiosity and fear of the unknown. At this moment, there is no doubt that curiosity overcomes fear. Sky Island. We will definitely go. Yang Qing also smiled and nodded. He must have said that there is someone he needs there. Ha 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 ha, a group of children actually want to go to the empty island. It really makes the old man laugh. At this moment, an old voice sounded. Everyone was stunned, then looked to the right, and said in surprise, there is an old man here. Bucky was even more surprised and shouted loudly, Gorokas. The old man was stunned for a moment. Someone here would recognize him. When he looked at Bucky, he couldn't help but be surprised. Bucky, your kid isn't dead yet. Bucky's face darkened, and all the people on the Death God pirate ship burst into laughter. You will die. I am now the captain of the first division of the Death God Pirates. Captain, that's really amazing. Goulokas smiled strangely, and then he looked at the other crew members. Yo, there are still a lot of people, it seems that you are well prepared. Yang Qing nodded, then smiled and said, yes, we are going to the New World. New World. Goulokas shouted loudly, his words were full of surprise and inconceivable, and then his eyes looked at everyone, and the meaning in his eyes undoubtedly expressed disdain and disbelief. Old Goulokas, don't look down on us, we are a big pirate group with a bounty of over 200 million. Bucky roared loudly. Oh, 200 million, a lot. Cut. Gorokas said disdainfully. Damn old man. Dylan's was full of black lines, completely disliking this old man. In the second half of this great waterway, there are big pirates with a bounty of over 200 million. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. There are too many, not to mention the pirates. In the New World, even 200 million big pirates will be brutally killed if they are not careful. You guys are just a little over 200 million pirates, you are really confident. Gorokas sneered mercilessly, causing anger on the faces of all the crew members. Yes, we are very confident. Only Yang Qing said casually with a smile, then, Senior Goulokas, do you have a recording pointer here? Goulokas narrowed his eyes, and there was a hint of seriousness on his face. You kid, you are really not cute. He suddenly took out a glass-like object from his arms and threw it to Yang Qing, who grabbed it with a smile. Thank you, Senior. I just want to see how you will die. For the sake of Bucky's once in a boat with me, see how miserable you will die. Gorokas sneered. Everyone's face turned black. This old man is really not cute. Okay, but here, Yang Qing is still only calm. Dylan's and the others were shocked when they heard Goulokas's words. This old man was in a boat with Bucky, and Bucky was on One Piece's boat. Could this old guy be the crew of One Piece? They all looked at Bucky. Ah, the old man Gorokas is our ship doctor. Bucky looked at Gorokas hatefully. Chapter 79 Whale Rab. Luo narrowed his eyes, as if he did not expect this rickety old man to be One Piece's ship doctor. From the looks of it, this is simply a snarky old man, very annoying. But he didn't say anything, he was a taciturn person. Okay, it's time for us to set off. There are a lot of things to do next. Yang Qing clapped his hands, focused everyone's attention, and said with a smile. Pour. Suddenly, a huge voice spread all over the place. This voice was very unique and very loud, and people almost turned their heads. Then, people saw a huge shadow faintly appearing in the sea water ahead, and then slammed into the shore. Boom! The ground trembled from the impact, and the Reaper shook violently in the sea. This is Sea Kings. Who can tell me, how can there be a Sea King here? My God, this is too big. Drizzt and the others shouted, making an incredible sound. Yang Qing looked at the huge whale that gradually emerged with a smile, and the criss-cross scars had already appeared in everyone's eyes. That's Rab, stupid young man. Golicus's voice rang out. It's a whale, a young man who can't tell the difference between a sea king and a whale. What a shame. Glades blushed, but was too embarrassed to speak. The person who thought it was the sea kings was coming, and it was him, which made him a little ashamed. Gradually, the entire body of the whale Rabu emerged, and his huge body brought a strong shock to the hearts and eyes of the people present. Even Yang Qing was shocked. In anime, it is completely different from what we see in reality. That immersive feeling can't be brought to you by any method. This guy is really big. Poor. Rab slammed hard towards the coast, and the solid wall was torn apart by the impact, and even the ground began to shake. The crowd stood on the ground, swaying from side to side, as if there was an earthquake. Rabu has been waiting for them. Looking at the whale, the skinny Gulokas sighed and looked at everyone's puzzled eyes, but he shook his head without explaining anything, turned around, and left here. This old man said half a sentence. Tic-tac-toe appeared on everyone's forehead, but they began to think about what happened to the whale. Yang Qing looked at everyone with a smile on his face. He naturally knew the story of the whale in his heart, and a skeleton could not help but appear in his mind. That skeleton condoned that the whole body was rotted, but still cherished his exploding head very much, just so that the whale would recognize him when they met again. Bruce. Yang Qing's eyes became deep. There are many touching stories in pirates, but each of them revolves around blood, affection, kindness, and commitment. In fact, only justice, kindness, and affection can truly make people's eyes blurred and their hearts moved. Jie Jing Yu Du Zai Jie Li, Wo Men De Chuan Chu Bu Kula, Kui Si Te Wei Guo Xian Lai, Kan Jie Shi Jin Zhuang Ji Hai and De Labu, Da Sheng Han Jie. Only then did everyone discover the terrifying fact that if this whale stayed here forever, they would have to be trapped here forever, which is a terrible thing. Rabu. Sitting in the lighthouse, the corners of Gulokas's eyes trembled violently, and there was a sparkling light. He had been here for decades, but every time he saw this whale, he felt pitiful. How cruel is it to wait for someone who will never show up? Rabu, I know you and who you are waiting for. Suddenly, there was a loud roar from outside the window, and Gurokas was taken aback, and hurriedly looked at the young man outside the window. He shouted in a hurry, "Road. Don't talk nonsense, don't make random claims." He stood up and walked outside. Yang Qing stood on the shore and faced Rab, who was constantly hitting his feet. The person you're waiting for is called Bruce, right? He has a handsome explosive head, doesn't he? Rabu screamed frantically and slammed into the ground below, but after listening to Yang Qing's words, he suddenly stopped hitting, and instead screamed even more excitedly. Poor. What? Gulokas just ran out of the door and was stunned to see this scene. He actually stopped Rabu. How is this possible? I, Lucifer, promise you that he will come back to see you. He has carefully protected his explosive head for decades, just to make you recognize him on the day he meets you. Yang Qing said slowly, and then pointed to the depths of the great waterway. You see, he is there, he will come back to see you. Poor. It's true, he's right there, Yang Qing said loudly. There were tears in Rab's eyes, and everyone felt stupid. Even in his heart, he thought that person would never come back. When he left, he was still so small, but when he found that his body was getting bigger and stronger, it finally realized the passage of time. Will that person come back? Is he still alive? It's just a whale, but it also has a mind of its own. It's just that its heart doesn't want to believe it, so it starts to go mad and starts hitting the ground. However, until now, someone told it that the person was still alive, and it still had that dazzling explosive head. Rabu, haha, did you see it? I'm so handsome. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Afro, see it later, that's me. The words that man had said still seemed to reverberate in his heart. There were sparkling tears in its eyes. He was alive and he would be back. Poor. Rabu raised his head and let out a loud cry, and then the man in front of him spoke again. In a little while, he'll be back and he'll be back to see you. So, Rab, you can't have scars all over your body, you have to protect yourself and make yourself the same as when you first met. The same way, he will recognize you at a glance, you know. Yang Qing said with a smile. Poor, Rab said excitedly. Now, Rabu, take a good rest, okay? Yang Qing asked again. Poor, Rab nodded, hearing the news that the man was still alive. Rab was very happy. On the edge of the coast, Yang Qing suddenly closed his eyes, a domineering aura suddenly rose, and Gulokas, who had already run out of the room, widened his eyes, something full of inconceivable. This is Buzz. The next moment, the space was distorted, and a very oppressive aura emanated towards Rab, but in an instant, Rab's eyes turned white and he fainted. You actually used this method to get Rabu out of the way. Gurokas ran over angrily. When it wakes up and finds out that you lied to it, it will go even more crazy, you bastard. Cheat it. Yang Qing raised his eyebrows. That's not necessarily true. Durance, move Rab to a quiet place and let it rest for a while. Yes, Captain. Chapter 80 The First Battle. Dylan stretched out his hands, but trembled slightly, and everyone vaguely saw that the large space in front was twisted, and Rabu's huge body gradually disappeared, and then it returned to normal. Gurokas was stunned when he saw this scene. He pointed at Dylan's and was speechless for a long time. Then, let's choose a route. Yang Qing ignored Guroka's surprise. He clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention, and then said loudly. The Great Channel now has a total of 7 channels. Which one should we go to? Drizzt asked in confusion. Do you still need to think about it? Of course it is. Yang Qing suddenly stretched out his finger and pointed forward. This one. Guloka's pupils shrank suddenly, and a look of shock appeared on his face. This is it. Bucky's face also changed color, and he murmured in a low voice, Roger's route. The route that Yang Qing stretched out his hand and pointed at random turned out to be the route that One Piece Roger sailed before. This scene surprised the two who knew the details immediately. Is this a coincidence of providence? Or maybe the captain knew that he was doing it on purpose. You must know that the Great Waterway has 7 routes, which will eventually converge into 5 routes, and then merge into one, just like 7 separate tributaries, which become 5 routes, and then become one. And these 7 routes are also easy and difficult. The one Yang Qing chose at this moment is the most rare. Let's set sail, Drizzt, let's enjoy the magnificent scenery of the Great Waterway. Yang Qing said loudly, standing on the bow, with a smile on his face. Okay, Captain. The crew began to get on board one by one and then took their places. Dylan's and Luo raised the sails, Drizzt firmly controlled the rudder, and the next moment, the Reaper shook and slowly started on the sea. Old Gurokas, we'll be back when we become famous. Bucky shouted loudly. Gulokas stared blankly as the Reaper went further and further away, his expression slowly showing a smile. Then, my old man is looking forward to your news. A group of ignorant little devils. Half an hour later, the Reaper entered a new sea area. The people on the boat looked at the sea ahead, with expressions on their faces that were excited, nervous, and fearful. Yang Qing sat cross-legged on the bow, with a fierce light in his eyes. The sea ahead was calm, but lurking terrifying danger. This is a dangerous sea, all pirates, come here is definitely not a joke. The ship sailed slowly. 2 hours later, the expressions of the people on the boat changed, and Yang Qing stood up even more. Looking ahead, he said slowly, come on, friends, the war has begun. Let's take a good look at the pirates of this great waterway. 2,000 meters ahead, a cloud of gunpowder filled the air, and the thick smoke billowed into the sky. There were bursts of shouts of killing, and it was faintly visible on the Reaper. Standing on the bow of the boat, Yang Qing clearly saw that the sea area had turned a faint red. The carnivorous fish in the deep sea smelled blood and lingered on the sea, with a cold light flashing in their eyes. This is a battle between pirates and pirates. The Reaper moved steadily forward, and soon approached 500 meters. Would you like to go around? Drizzt asked calmly, observing left and right. Go around. Yang Qing raised his eyebrows and a smile appeared on his face. No, let's crush them. A group of vicious, greedy pirates who shot for money. We also need money, so we have to do it too. Dylan's mouth curled into a cold smile. This is really evil, Bucky murmured, and then he smiled happily. I like it a lot though. The Reaper quickly approached the two pirate ships in front, and the figures on the ships fell into the sea one by one, dyeing the sea a bright red color. Different from the elite composition of the Reaper, these two pirate ships are huge ships, and the figures on them are indistinct. It seems that there are hundreds of people, and the scale is quite large. The goal is clear, annihilate them all for me, and put all their treasures into my pirate ship. Yang Qing's mouth crooked, cruelly said. At this moment, he finally released his own danger signal. Pirates, you should do it in the way of pirates. To relatives, brothers, friends, affection, commitment, trustworthiness, friendliness, cruelty to enemies, no mercy at all. Whether it is the white beard, the head of the four emperors, who is far away in the New World, or the red hair at the moment, they are all of this type. Once it is determined that the relationship between each other is against each other, then the shot must be ruthless and decisive. And the death god pirates, since they are called death gods, must not be kind. Grim Reaper, even if he smiles, there will be blood flowers blooming from the corners of his mouth. Soon, pirates on the two ships noticed the approach of the Reaper. They were stunned for a moment, and then with a ferocious smile on their faces, they shouted and began to summon their partners. Everyone's attention, there is a pirate ship approaching us, it's coming, it's raging. The captains of the two pirate ships fought each other once, and after the tachi in their hands made a fierce sound of gold and iron, they shouted towards the rear. Hey, Eugens, I really didn't expect that someone would come to pick you up and mine. The pirate ship on the opposite side said mockingly. Yuski, Eugens, offered a bounty of 45 million. I came from the four seas and came to this great waterway. Would I be afraid of this little pirate ship? Eugens said loudly, taking a step forward and holding his hands. The long knife swung down again. Yuski raised his knife to greet each other, and the huge strength of the two made each other's faces flush red. Hey, then let the little ones clean them up and we'll end our 5-year war. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Fight. Yuski glanced down. The little pirate ship had stopped. He looked disdainful and smiled. It's exactly what I want. Eugens shouted, his strength strengthened. On the Grim Reaper, the crowd began to riot. The ship has stopped under the two huge pirate ships, but they are making a noise at the moment because of one thing. Hey, every time I fight, I usually go. Although I'm a cook, I have dignity, okay. This time, I'm going to go anyway. Glades shouted loudly. There are a lot of them, so let me go. Luo's expression was calm. Well, actually, my hands are a little itchy. I think if I go, I will definitely be able to resolve the battle quickly. These are Dylan's words. Well, Captain, I actually did a calculation just now. My luck is not very good today. I definitely won't be able to go. They are all so excited, so let them go. Drizzy's face was dark and painful. Said Tangled. Quote. Bucky hid behind, and seemed to have become dumb at this time, not saying a word. Yang Qing glanced around in front of everyone, then smiled and said, then, just Drizzt, go with Bucky, 1 pirate ship per person, and resolve the battle as soon as possible. I believe in you. After hearing this, the two looked at each other, their faces suddenly bitter.